Good morning. My name is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner presiding over today's hearing. The date is June 29th, 2023, and this is case DCI2022-00050. It's a rezoning request from the Penzance Square CPD to the Penzance Square CPD, to make some minor amendments to the master concept plan and some revisions to the schedule of uses. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all evidence and testimony must be taken under oath, so if you intend to speak, if you could please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide is the truth?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I'll apologize at the beginning. I have a tickle in my throat, so bear with me if I'm drinking a lot of water as we go. I'll do my best. With respect to how we'll go this morning, though, first we're going to hear from the applicant in the case. They're going to present their requests and call any witnesses that they may have to support that request. Following their presentation, we will turn to the county staff. They will present their review in the case, which is a recommendation of approval in this case with conditions. After we hear from the county staff, we'll open the public comment period. If you've submitted a form, I'll have them here and I'll call them in the order that I've received them. There is only one opportunity to speak at the podium, so I would encourage you to take notes as we go through things this morning to make the most of your time, but there is no time limitation, so you can take as long as you would like. If the folks before you have said things that you agree with, you can simply say that you agree with them, and we'll make note of that in the record. Following the public comment period, we'll come back to the applicant and the staff, and they'll present their rebuttal to address any of the questions or concerns that were raised during public comment, and then provide their closing comments before we conclude the hearing. The case will go from my office here. I will issue a recommendation matter. So if you speak today, you will have an opportunity to speak at the board. You will be limited to the comments that you made today. So again, please make sure that you're making the most of the time that you have at the podium. And if you do not speak today, you would not be able to speak at that board hearing. So with that, we will go ahead and begin with the applicant.
Madam Hearing Examiner, before we begin, I just wanted to put into the record from staff exhibit that this has been advertised. The affidavit did go into the news press, and I have that form.
Thank you. You can give me one moment. I don't have my exhibit sheet here. Let me get that so I can make notes on the record. I apologize. So that would be staff's exhibit 2. Staff exhibit 1 was pre-labeled as the staff report. Thank you for that. Good morning.
Morning. Madam Hearing Examiner, I'm Jeff Wright, for the record, with the Henderson Franklin Law Firm. Here with our project team, the applicant, some representatives are here, and myself, Wayne Arnold, our planner, Mike Herrera, our professional engineer, Jim Banks, our traffic consultant, and Tim Hall, environmental. I'll give a broad overview, and Wayne's obviously going to get into the nitty-gritty, but we're basically seeking an approval of an amendment to an existing CPD, the Penzance Square CPD, to update the schedule of uses, increase the approved commercial square footage, and to update the master concept plan. It's just a rough location there. It's about 9.79 acres near the southwest corner of Penzance Boulevard and 6 Mile Cypress. We have a second picture here. It's a zoomed out version. We have reviewed the staff report. We agree with their analysis, their recommendation of approval. There's several conditions in there. We agree with every one of them. And also they've proposed some changes to the proposed list of uses to lessen the impact of the project, and we agree with those changes as well. There are no deviations, so nothing to address there. Wayne is going to come up first and provide the bulk of the testimony relating to planning considerations and the application. The rest of our team is also here in case any questions come up. And just a couple preliminary matters to address. The 48-hour letter, there were no issues really that we had with staff, so there's nothing to cover there. The experts, I would like to recognize Wayne as an expert before he begins, and Wayne has testified in this tribunal before and has been recognized as an expert as a professional planner, and we ask that you recognize him as a professional planner this morning.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And of course, if we need to recognize additional experts, we'll address them at that time. Exhibits. We have really one exhibit. It does contain the master concept plan, which is already a matter of record. But if I may bring a copy, I've provided a copy to staff already.
Okay, thank you. So that would be applicant's exhibit 1. Thank you. And the master concept plan that's contained in here is the same that was provided in the
It
staff
is.
report?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and at this point, I just wanted to thank staff for putting in the time and effort on this project, and you, hearing examiner, for your patience this morning. And with that, I'll turn it over to Wayne. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Wayne Arnold. I'm a certified planner with Grady Minor and Associates, here representing the applicant. And as Mr. Wright mentioned, we're in concurrence largely with the staff report. I know that Ms. Workman has a minor modification that she'll make as part of her presentation that we've discussed, and we have no objection to that. The project, as has been mentioned, is just under 10 acres. It's an existing CPD. It's in the central urban future land use category, and it was previously approved for a 90,000 square foot project that included retail, medical office, a lot of other services, and our proposal reduces the square footage associated with the uses down to 80,000 square feet, but we're inserting the opportunity to put in mini and public warehousing, 105,000 square feet. And you'll hear testimony from Jim Banks that with these changes, we've actually lessened traffic impacts on the overall project scope. So the future land use designation, central urban, it's one of your more intensive land use categories. It allows everything from higher density residential to commercial and even light industrial. So the uses that we proposed have been determined to be compliant with the LEAP plan by our analysis as well as staff's analysis. Around us, as mentioned in the staff report, we had a project that was recently rezoned to RPD from CPD to our south. So I think you'll see when we get to our master plan that we've hopefully done a very good job retaining the enhanced buffers that were required from the prior project, as well as relocating the preserve to the west and south part of this property to, again, act as an additional buffer for compatibility. Here's just a reference of all the communities. You can see there's a lot going on. Penzance Boulevard, you heard another case fairly recently just to the west of this one for a residential project. And as part of that project, you heard that Penzance had recently been upgraded to a major collector roadway. And so it also, and I don't think it was mentioned, but signalized access to 6 Mile Cypress at Penzance. So it makes sense for this to continue to be a commercial project with access to that signalized intersection. So this was the original approved master plan. Again, it had one of the features of that, and I'll just use my pointer if that's okay. There were 2 points of ingress and egress on Penzance at this location with an optional access out onto 6 Mile. And we originally submitted this application with 2 access points to Penzance, and as this wandered its way through the review process, we were asked to reduce that to a single point of access, which is now shown in this location on our new master concept plan. So we propose single access to Penzance at that location. It meets access spacing from the Cypress Walk RPD property, and staff has supported that access location.
2 access points that were previously on Penzance, what was the reasoning for retaining the western and not the eastern?
I think I defer to Mr. Banks, but I think it allowed for greater stacking distance from the intersection. I'll let him confirm that. He's going to get up and speak very briefly in just a few minutes. So this one had preserve areas that wrapped to the west and south. Our proposed new master plan also wraps a little bit to the west and south, but we have enhanced buffering dry detention in this area, and then we retain the condition that requires a 25-foot wide landscape buffer along Penzance. So those were enhanced buffering that were originally required, and staff is recommending those be retained, and we have no objection to that as well. So this move, we call it more flex office space. So primary tenants here would probably be contractor type uses, people who need a storefront with some warehousing space behind them. I'm sure we've all utilized places like that but it's all internal use. There's no external use of the property. There's no fabrication associated with staff's recommended changes. And then the mini and public warehouse building is located here farther to the south, immediately abutting 6 Mile. And of course, this is kind of odd, but the little triangular piece, this is a conventionally zoned piece of property that's not part of the assemblage. Our client was unsuccessful in acquiring that property. So it's a little wedge of property that's not part of us, and it's zoned commercial, and not sure what it will ultimately become, but I just want to point out it's not part of our property. So staff obviously has a schedule of uses, and we also have a schedule of uses here, and I won't swear that it exactly aligns with Ms. Workman's, because one of the issues that's going to come up was the question of personal services. There was an exclusion for certain uses, and I don't want to steal Beth's thunder here, but she had stricken that language and wants to retain it as we've shown it here, going ahead and excluding massage parlors, steamer Turkish baths, dating services, escort services, palm readers, fortune tellers, card readers, tattoo parlors, etc. So those would be stricken as part of this approval. And I think Beth's copy probably will make that very clear.
Okay, so that will be discussed a little later?
Yes.
Okay.
But the schedule of uses as proposed, she had eliminated, for instance, contractor group 2, which I believe allowed for more of the fabrication type uses, and that's not what we intend, so we're comfortable with that change in use. We have proposed development regulations. We kept the 2-story, 35 feet in height limitation for all uses except the warehouse, mini and public, which would be allowed to go to 3 stories, not to exceed 45 feet. Pretty common in this industry that you have 3-story storage facilities around the community, and believe that's compatible given its location right on 6 Mile Cypress, as well as the preserve area that's to our west.
And on that point, it says 2 stories, but the master concept plan, I assume the DO that's pending is consistent with the MCP. It actually shows what's proposed are single story for those 4 flex spaces. Is that consistent?
I'm getting the answer yes.
Okay.
It's consistent. Yeah.
Thank
It
you.
allowed 2-story max, but the development order shows those as single-story buildings.
Okay.
We did a complete environmental assessment, and the staff noted in their report and the backup information, there are some very poor quality wetlands that are highly exotic infested. There's a condition that simply says we have to obtain our environmental resource permit through the Water Management District before we can impact that property, and obviously that's a statutory requirement anyway, so we have no problem with that. And we also did a full traffic impact statement. Jim Banks prepared that, and I think I'd like him to come up and just talk for a couple minutes about his analysis and what his couple of slides represent, because I think we're going to hear from some of the neighbors. They have concerns about traffic. So Jim, if you can maybe do that. In case you need it.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. I too have a tickle in my throat.
It's going around.
Yeah, we must have the same trees in our yard. For the record, Jim Banks. I'm a professional engineer in the state of Florida. I've been recognized by Hearing Examiner's Office on numerous past occasions as an expert in the fields of traffic and transportation engineering. My firm prepared the traffic study for the Penzance Square project. The traffic study was prepared pursuant to the criteria set forth by Lee County government. Your staff reviewed the traffic impact study and agreed with its findings and conclusions. The traffic study was based upon the proposed amendment that is, from a traffic standpoint, is a down zoning case. In other words, we're taking more intense traffic generator uses, and we're requesting approval to develop something that generates fewer trips. In this case, the property was previously approved for 90,000 square feet of retail, medical, and office space. And as Mr. Arnold pointed out, we're now proposing to develop 105,000 square feet of self-storage space, as well as some specialty contractor space, 80,000 square feet. We estimated the site-generated trips for what the existing entitlements are today, as well as what is being proposed. And what was previously established was that the current entitlements will generate 390 PM peak hour trips during the PM peak hour. Now, that doesn't also account for pass-by traffic and captured traffic, which is associated with retail uses. So the actual trips that would be generated to and from the site are higher than the 390. The 390 are actually all new trips that would be generated. The mini warehouse and the specialty contract space, which generates no pass-by traffic but is all new trips, would generate 170 new PM peak hour trips. So there'll be less than half the volume of traffic generated from this site if you approve this amendment than what the current entitlement would be. And just so everyone in the room understands, if it's developed based upon the current entitlements, it will generate more than twice the amount of traffic than if you approve the amendment and let them build something less intense. We then assess the project's impacts to the adjacent road network based upon what we're proposing. And we determine that Penzance Boulevard, which is defined as a major collector by Lee County, which is a public road, which is maintained by Lee County, will operate at level of service C, which is a high level of service, at the completion of the project build-out, and approximately 51% of the road's capacity will be utilized. And now, I am talking, when I say 51% of the road's capacity, I'm talking about the busiest section between, let me go back one more slide where we're proposing our access. Between this point of access onto Penzance Boulevard and its signalized intersection with 6 Mile, on that segment, we'll see a 51% of the road's capacity will be utilized, and therefore everything to the west of the access will have less demand, obviously, because our project traffic, most of our project traffic, sorry about that, will use the access by way of 6 Mile Cypress Parkway. And then the Madam Hearing Examiner had the question as to why we chose the location of the westernmost access versus the eastern, which previously was approved for 2 points of access. That is for the separation from the signal to allow for this left turn lane to be constructed. So anyone that is on Penzance Boulevard that is traveling westbound past the site will not be impeded by traffic turning left into the site. So anyone that's coming into the project will enter into this left turn lane, come to a stop, and wait for an acceptable gap in traffic to turn left into the site. So westbound traffic flow on Penzance Boulevard would not be impeded, and obviously eastbound will not either, because the people turning left off of Penzance Boulevard must yield to the eastbound traffic flow. In addition to, we also analyzed the impacts on the 6 Mile Cypress Parkway, which is defined as an arterial. We determined that it would operate at level of service C and at 67% of the road's capacity. So again, high level of service. We also analyzed the intersection of Penzance Boulevard and 6 Mile, the signalized intersection, and found that the intersection currently operates at a high level of service and will continue to operate at a high level of service at project build out. It will operate at level of service C for the AM peak hour and at level of service C for the PM peak hour, which is a high level of service for a signalized intersection. The report concludes, and staff agreed with it, that again, the proposed amendment will generate substantially less traffic than what is currently entitled, and that Penzance Square will not have a significant or negative impact on the surrounding road network. And it was confirmed that all roadways within the project's area of influence currently have a surplus of capacity and can accommodate the project traffic. That concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
With regard to the access points, again, just comparing what was currently approved today, you've got the two access points on Penzance where you're eliminating one, but you also had the access that was shown on 6 Mile, but that's a limited access facility. So was that contemplated in the board's ordinance to actually have been a connection point?
Yeah, the board actually contemplated that this would be an access point. It would be an entitlement for this project, but Simply because it's an entitlement does not mean that you have to build it. In other words, there's no obligation on the property owner to actually have access on the 6 Mile Cypress. It was something that was granted to this site. The owners that are looking at developing this property are looking at doing something substantially less intense than before, and that the priority to have access on 6 Mile is just not there any longer. And so they're proposing to have, again, the single point of access onto Penzance Boulevard, which provides signalized access to 6 Mile Cypress.
So that access point on 6 Mile is being removed because it's no longer warranted with the intensity that's being proposed and the traffic generation.
Yeah, it's no longer necessary as we determine that the capacity on Penzance Boulevard at project completion will be at 51% of its capacity. So, you know, if you have a 5-gallon bucket, it's 2.5 gallons full. So you've got a lot of excess capacity there that's not being used.
And how does that impact, I think it's the Carissa CPD that's south of it, because the current site plan showed what appears to be a reverse frontage road that was providing connection to that.
Yeah, and so, yeah. So I wish it showed a little bit more. Let me go back to the aerial, actually. Okay, so this property to the south of us actually has access easements down to another road. Can't think of the name. What, Crystal? Yeah, Crystal Drive Extension. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Crystal Drive, which is contemplated by the county to extend all the way from US 41 all the way over to 6 Mile Cypress Parkway. So this property here will have access to that. Now, it is possible, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the property owner here may ask that the county allow them to build the access, shift it further, a little bit further to the south, and they could build the access out on 6 Mile Cypress. So we're not prohibiting it to be constructed. It's just for this development, it's not necessary, and the property owner is elected not to build it. If the property to the south of us decides that that's something that they're interested in pursuing, then they could request that approval from the Board of County Commissioners.
I think that was all of the questions I had relating to that for now. I'm sure more will come up as we go through this.
Okay.
Again, Wayne Arnold for your record. I'm just going to make some closing remarks with regard to the planning considerations, because your land development code does have certain criteria for you have to address successfully to rezone a property to plan development. And first and foremost is LEA plan consistency. And I think we've documented that the proposed uses that we have proposed and as conditioned, we have uses that are consistent with the central urban future land use category. LDC consistency, we've already submitted a development order. There are no deviations associated with it, so we believe we're in 100% compliance with your land development code. Compatibility, staff did a good job, I think, of addressing the buffer standards, compatibility with some of the revised uses, and we believe that we've offered a project that's fully compatible with surrounding development. You just heard Mr. Banks address traffic impacts. That's another consideration, so we're significantly reducing the traffic impacts associated with it. And again, I would just say that the Crystal Drive access is actually down here that Carissa can address. That would have been a right in, right out only on our property. It makes so much more sense for us as a business community to have access to a signalized access point. So we believe from a traffic standpoint, we're very compatible. Environmental impacts, your staff has concluded that what we're proposing makes sense. The preservation area will meet or exceed your LDC requirement. And then with regard to urban services, we have full urban services available to the site. It's in your central urban area, so it's expected that this is going to be an intense. You can add the additional square footage, as you heard Mr. Banks indicate, without any negative impact on the road. So with that, we believe we've met all of your LDC criteria and are entitled to the proposed amendment. So I'm here to answer questions, and we have other team members, obviously, if that comes up, that can answer questions as well.
I had questions about conditions and things. I can
Okay.
wait until after the staff does
Okay.
their presentation if you'd like. Was there someone that you had that could just discuss stormwater management generally? There was a lot of discussion about it in the staff report.
Okay, sure. We can have Michael Herrera from our firm come up. He's prepared the stormwater analysis for the Water Management District permit.
Thank you.
Probably went on to look at the conceptual master plan. I don't know if you want a pointer, but this one's a little brighter.
All right, thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning. Michael Herrera, registered civil engineer, state of Florida. First time in front of this heck, so I guess.
Do we have a resume on file?
There was one submitted? I'm not sure. Been practicing in the area for over 20 years, so.
Okay, just briefly, if you could discuss educational credentials and
Yep.
detail the nature of that discussion.
No problem. Graduate from Colorado School of Mines, accredited university, specializes in all engineering aspects, and been practicing civil engineering in the state of Florida for over 20 years.
And in Lee County as well?
Yeah, Lee County, Collier County, Sarasota.
I don't have any objections. Does staff have any objections?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So as Wayne mentioned, we have already submitted a development order and an ERP application. So as part of that South Florida Water Management District Environmental Resource Permit application, we're required to look at many aspects of stormwater management, which include floodplain compensation, nutrient loading, and general attenuation for peak storm events. So we have done the analysis for floodplain compensation. The project is an exporter. There's an importer-exporter analysis, meaning we don't store off-site water on our property. Whatever we generated on our property was actually more than what was able to store in pre-development. So as long as we don't adversely impact it in post-development, we're considered an exporter. So we've done that analysis for floodplain compensation. We've also looked at nutrient loading, which is required through the basis of review through the district, and that includes nitrogen, phosphorus, and also impaired water bodies. So we are providing all the requirements for the nitrogen, phosphorus, nutrient loading. Again, post-development can't exceed pre-development. We've gone through that analysis. All of the peak stages are determined from the 25-year and the 100-year storm events. So we are attenuating with the allowable discharge rates into the 6-mile cypress, the canal along the roadway. So there is a single control structure on site, and we are attenuating the 25-year. So the perimeter berm is set at the 25-year elevation, and the finished floor elevations are set at the 100-year elevation.
Once it goes to the sloop, big picture, does it ultimately go to the 10-mile canal?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the comments, I think, was that currently the site's not accepting any off-site flow because Penzance operates essentially as a stop to any of the northern waters that are flowing?
There's a existing swale that goes east-west along there, so Penzance is not accepting waters from basically the right-of-way.
Okay. And the ERP that you'll get through the district will ensure that you're not affecting anybody downstream,
That's
essentially?
our
Okay.
number one
And the
priority.
ERP's been submitted but not issued yet?
That's correct. We are in for the second review as we speak, so I expect permit issuance. Well, we have some environmental that needs to be, so depending on environmental, in terms of stormwater, I would say all of those are going to be found sufficient within 30 days.
Thank you. Did staff have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Did that conclude applicant's presentation for now?
Yes, that concludes our presentation. We just want an opportunity to rebut if needed and closing statement.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. Staff ready to proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Beth Workman. I'm the lead planner. I work in the zoning section as a principal planner. I have been accepted in this forum before as an expert in the lead plan and land development code, and I wish to do so today as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. The first thing I want to do, I just want to put into the record that I had around 50 to 55 calls and spoke to residents in the area, as well as roughly 35 to 40 letters. The letters have been scanned into the caseload, and I wish to present them to the hearing examiner as well.
Yes, thank you. Did
I
you
have
have a copy?
one copy. I can get you a copy if you would, copies. Okay,
Following hearing with
following. I'll hang on to it for now, if that's okay.
Yes, I'll just make a note here. I would accept your PowerPoint generally as through, well, I've got staff report would be staff exhibit 1. The notice that you submitted was staff exhibit 2. The PowerPoint would be number 3, and then the letters of opposition would be number 4.
Okay, and I'll give you the PowerPoint as well while you're putting those things in order. do have copies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And then I have one for you as well. Okay. So this is case DCI 2022-00050, Penzance Square Commercial Plan Development. Just going to go through the request. Mr. Arnold went through thoroughly the surrounding uses and what was in the request was encompassing. This is a request to amend an existing commercial plan development. So if this request doesn't get recommended for approval, the board doesn't approve it, the applicant could go in and build what is in the current zoning resolution for that commercial plan development. But the applicant is requesting to amend the approval, the zoning resolution Z06062. The request is to increase the commercial square feet from 90,000 to 185,000 square feet. The project is limited. It's limited to 105,000 square feet of public or mini warehouse, and then 80,000 square feet of commercial uses. The applicant is requesting to add business services, contractor offices, and warehouse, public, private, and mini, to the existing schedule of uses that was previously approved. They're requesting to modify the building configuration, the indigenous preserve area, and access to Penzance Boulevard on the master concept plan. Staff has recommended approval with conditions, which include assessing the schedule of uses and pulling some of those uses that they're requesting to add to the uses off of the recommendation. So the property history and the character of the area. So resolution Z95-011 was a rezone from AG2 to commercial plan development. It was vacated. And then resolution Z06062 revised the schedule of uses and the master concept plan to have what is approved today with the 2 access points on Penzance and the strip center, 1 cohesive building with that alternate access onto Benzie Pratt and 6 Mile. The surrounding uses, to the north is Penzance Boulevard. It's a county-maintained major collector. To the north of Penzance is Cypress Walk. It is a residential plan development that was rezoned in 2005 from commercial plan development. So this area up in here was once commercial plan development. The residential plan development was approved for 216 single-family and multifamily units. The maximum height on this property was 35 feet. That is built today. There is a DO, there's homes, there is a large wetland preserve on that. To the south is Carissa. Carissa has been rezoned in 2021 to a residential plan development. So it no longer is a commercial plan development. The MCP right now as it stands shows commercial plan development on there. That will need to be revised to show that it is a residential plan development to the south. So it was rezoned from commercial plan development, which was approved with Z06007. So Carissa, which we spoke a little bit about, Jim Banks spoke about it, is down in here. That is residential, approved for 260 multifamily units with 87 bonus density units with a maximum height of 50 feet. So we have a 50-foot max here. We've got the 35 feet here. Surrounding uses. To the west. So to the west of the property is Coral Rock RPD. It was approved in 1998 for 76 multifamily units with a maximum height of 35 feet. So that's in here. And then further west, the JV Parker is a 96 multifamily unit that was rezoned in 92. That is a maximum height of 35 feet. So we have 35 feet approved to the north of the subject property and 35 feet to the west. To the northwest is conventionally zoned residential and agricultural properties. that are located, this is the ag property, and this is the RS1 way up here. This site right here is in the city of Fort Myers, and that is Heritage Palms, and they have access to Penzance right here. To the southwest is a residential plan development that has 92 multifamily or townhouse units with a maximum height of 35 feet, and that was approved by Zoning Resolution 13-025. So to the west, to the south, and to the northwest, you roughly have a 35-foot maximum height. To the south, where Carissa is, it's 50 feet. And that's important because of the mini warehouse height at 45 feet. To the east, it was talked about this little triangular piece right here. That's a special commercial office district. That's a CS2 conventionally zoned piece of property. The master concept plan that's being proposed by the applicant has a cross-access easement that connects to this triangular piece to the east. Further east, of course, is 6 Mile Cypress. On the other side of 6 Mile Cypress is the 6 Mile Cypress Slough Preserve. That is a 3,500-acre park. It has a boardwalk, a butterfly garden. The trailhead and this signalized intersection right here, the trailhead is exactly across the street from it at that signalized intersection. So the future land use category, this site, as well as all the property to the north, west, and south, is within the central urban future land use category. And that's Lee Plan Policy 1.1.3. Mr. Arnold went over that thoroughly, how it, it's the urban core, heavily settled. It has urban services associated with it. And its goal in the future land use category for future development is encouraged to be a mix of uses within that central urban. And so by providing this mix of commercial in here with the residential, you are meeting the central urban goal, essentially, to provide those mix of uses to support the residential neighborhoods. And then on the other side, I just wanted to touch on this a little bit because we do have some policies for the 6 Mile Cypress watershed in our Lee plan that are associated with the type of plant material that goes in for landscaping. The conservation lands, wetland and conservation lands, upland, that's Lee Plan Policy 1.4.6. And so the use in that is to be owned and used for long-range conservation purposes. That's the purpose of the conservation lands, wetland, and upland. So this is the approved master concept plan as it stands today. So we went over in length the 2 access points, this alternate here, and then there was this cross access down here. Now it's being moved kind of up in here, with one cohesive building and the parking. And then you have the preserve area that wraps with the several detention areas to handle the impervious. This is what's being proposed today. So of course, the one access point, the preserve, is limited to the southern portion of the property. We still have the enhanced buffering. We do have protection measures over here, the 15-foot buffer for the residential to the west, as well as the residential to the south. There's a cross-access easement, and there's a condition in the zoning about this ingress-egress easement right here for future connection to this property if it gets developed. And then we have the four buildings here instead of the one cohesive building over here, and then the warehouse. So these are 35 feet, meshing with the 35 feet that surrounds on all sides, and then 45 feet here with a 50-foot max on this property down here. So Lee Plan compliance. The amendment is consistent with the future land use category for central urban, as well as the mix of uses that are going into the site to support the surrounding residential, including the mini warehouse. It has adequate facilities for infrastructure. It does have the urban services. The applicant did submit the letters stating that there was sewer and water provided to the property. The commercial land uses are consistent with essential services, the site design standards, the open space, the buffering. Open space is over than what is required, and we'll get into that a little bit later. The buffering is enhanced, and staff believes that with the removal of some of the uses in the schedule of uses, that it is compatible with the surrounding uses. The design of the stormwater management system and utilization of green infrastructure, that coincides with LEAD Plan Objectives 60.2 and 60.3, as well as the policies that support those objectives. Staff provided a condition that required that the detention areas be planted with native grasses, native herbaceous material to provide another level of filtration. So the requested schedule of uses are underlined here. The cleaning and maintenance services, the contractors and builders, group 1 and 2, freight and cargo handling establishments, the lumber and wood products manufacturing, group 2, the non-store retailers, groups 1, 2, and 3, the research and development laboratories, groups 2 and 4, as well as warehouse, mini, public, and private. This is what the applicant has requested. The staff report provided recommended striking some of those uses, as you see before you. So the contractors and builders, group 2 is struck. The freight and cargo handling establishments is struck. The lumber and wood products manufacturing, group 2, has been removed. Medical offices were approved prior to. Staff has struck that because the level of parking that is needed to support a medical office, the master concept plan is not conducive to that. And that's an intensity that would add to that one access point. The personal services, staff struck the excluding part. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit here. And then the warehouse, mini public, the private has been struck. So private warehouse is not open to the public, doesn't support the surrounding uses. It's like a private warehouse that would be like a Coca-Cola plant or Amazon or things of that nature that would have an intensity level with the traffic and that one access point that wouldn't be conducive or compatible with the surrounding uses. And then just as a housekeeping measure, staff removed the citations to the land development code because it's not necessary. So the change. So.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you go 1 second?
Oh, yeah.
So the private's been struck. Can you just explain briefly what mini and public would provide for that warehousing building?
So mini and public, and I explained it in the staff report, and I might mix them, but one, the public warehouse is more of, I'm going to mix them up. It's one access point, I could be wrong, it's in the staff report, one access point getting into one building with individual storage units inside that one building. And then the mini would be more of, you have access from the outside with slider doors and that kind of thing. So,
Benefit of
Yes.
both of them would operate similar to like a U-Haul self-storage facility or something where someone is storing personal goods and they're coming at an infrequent rate to
correct.
visit their goods that are stored there and maybe retrieve.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So
on a personal note, I just used one of these, and you have a key fob, or you have a key that goes in, and there's hours of operation where if you go there, the key fob's not going to work under certain hours. So that is kind of how that works. A private warehouse could be 24/7 because you have deliveries going out, and Coca-Cola would go out early in the morning, or, Amazon could go out all hours, even Saturday and Sunday. So you'll have that as a business more so that doesn't serve the public, which in the central urban, central urban's pretty intense, but in this setting with the surrounding uses, it isn't conducive. So that's kind of.
Okay, so the technical differences between mini and public I know are explained in detail, but under either scenario, it's essentially that dead storage space and how you access it triggers which code definition you might be under when they actually go to get their DO or their building permit.
Correct.
But for benefit of understanding what the site's going to look like, it's going to be some kind of self-storage facility.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the revised schedule of uses is to add back in the exclusion of the massage parlors, the steam and Turkish baths, the dating services, escort services, the palm readers. And I have a new set of, for attachment E, a new set.
Thank you. Is that the only change?
That's the only change.
Thank you. So that will be staff exhibit 5. Thank you very much.
Besides the master concept plan for the Carissa CPD to RPD, that was the other change. So traffic impacts. Mr. Banks went into detail kind of explaining what's happening with the change from what is currently approved to what the request is, and the reduction because of the mini warehouse coming in at 105,000 square feet. So I'm not going to belabor that topic, but that is why the limitation on the one access point, because you're not going to, it's not like a business where you're coming in there all day long, in and out, passersby. You have to have a unit in that mini warehouse. You're going there. So the traffic is a lot less, and the traffic impact statement provided shows that with the trip generation. So I'm not going to go into detail. There is a condition in the staff report, attachment E, and it's condition 10A. And what that condition does, it ensures at a time of development order that the requested square feet associated with the warehouse and the specialty trade contractors is adhered to of what's in the zoning per the traffic impact statement. Because what's in our schedule of uses in chapter 34 and how the ITE manual assesses things can be a little bit different. And so that just assures that the applicant is adhering to the 105,000 square feet of because that's the whole point of how this is not affecting the traffic, it's lowering the traffic. So we kind of look at that. The development order that's in right now did have a recent resubmittal that showed in the TIS a higher square feet, which probably will be an insufficiency comment by staff. I just wanted to add that in there. It's like 107,000 square feet, so that will need to be looked at if this gets approved. If it doesn't, then the warehouse goes away because it's not on the schedule of uses. Again, that's the master concept plan. The land development code, I just want to go over some of the code sections that apply to buffering because the applicant is keeping the enhanced buffering on the north, east, and then the south and the west are complying with the land development code. So let's go through the environmental and the landscaping. So 10-425 is our open space, and open space is green space on the site. So you can't get wall-to-wall concrete on a site. You have a certain percentage, and it's based on the amount of impervious or the size. So this site is over 2 acres of impervious, so they have to provide 30% of the site as open space. They're providing 44%. As part of that open space, half of it needs to be represented on the master concept plan as indigenous or native vegetation. So to understand what is on the site, the applicant must provide a species survey that includes transects that were walked by the applicant's environmental staff. County staff verifies that through the review of the zoning case to look for protected species that are on our list and the state's list, as well as look for indigenous vegetation that could be saved on site to represent the 50% of the required open space. So in this case, the wetlands that are on site do not meet our indigenous definition. So our indigenous definition is 75% or less exotics is indigenous. Some parts of this indigenous preserve are more than 75%, so they don't meet our definition. However, the applicant is providing 1.18 acres of indigenous preservation area They're required 1.47. So this happens sometimes on projects where they just don't have the indigenous. So they make up for that open space, the green space, with the landscaping, the general open space, as I call it, that's part of the design for the buffering, detention area can count as open space, that kind of thing. But they are providing 1.18 acres of a preservation area that is being restored. And we typically do not get restoration plans in a zoning case, but when something like this happens, staff asks for that. And so we receive the planting plan that's going to go in for the restoration of that preserve. As part of that requirement, staff has provided a condition that the overall landscaping, the buffering, the anything that goes around the building for their building perimeter, any of that, as well as the indigenous plantings, does meet the 6 Mile Cypress Slough watershed list of plants that are in our land development code. So that is attached to the staff report as an exhibit to make sure that at time of DO that the plant material being selected by the landscape architect does meet that list to support the slough and any wildlife that happens to utilize the site. So the 1.18 is the acres, is the preserve. Going into the buffering section is 10-416, D as in dog. So looking at the buffering, and I'm kind of going to flip back and forth. So Penzance Boulevard buffer, the code requires a 15-foot wide buffer. The applicant is providing a 25-foot landscape buffer, and they say LBE, which is landscape buffer easement. So on Ben C. Pratt and 6 Mile Cypress, the applicant is providing 25-foot, and the code requires 15 feet. So anytime you're against a right-of-way, it's a 15-foot wide buffer. That buffer will include 5 trees every 100 feet and a double staggered hedge is the code requirement. So staff has conditioned in 6A the buffer conditions that need to be adhered to at time of DO. So that is a 25-foot wide buffer. That buffer includes the 5 trees every 100 feet and then the double staggered hedgerow. The trees are increased in size on both those buffers. So code requires 10 foot tall. The condition is 16 foot high, and then the caliper, 4-inch caliper, and there's no palms allowed, so there's going to be coverage on that. Palms tend to give less coverage unless you cluster them. And then the shrubs are increased too. Shrubs at code is 24 inches. This condition allows them to go in at 36 inches and then be maintained at 64 for compatibility purposes. So that's the north buffer, as well as a portion of the eastern buffer that abuts Penzance. So then 6 Mile Cypress. And then the rest of the eastern buffer I want to go into next, and that is the special commercial district. It's abutting the special commercial district. So typically in the land development code, when you are commercial and you're abutting another commercial property, you have a 5-foot wide required buffer. The applicant is providing a 15-foot wide required buffer, and it's called a type A buffer. Well, a type A buffer is 5 trees every 100 feet and no shrubs, and it's 5 feet wide. The applicant is providing 15 right here, a 15-foot wide buffer, and in condition 6B, that buffer must contain 8 trees per 100 linear feet instead of the 4 trees per 100 linear feet. And there's a single hedgerow that's planted 2 foot on center. The trees typically go in at 10 feet. These are going to go in at 16 foot high. So they're increased to match the right-of-way buffer trees. And then you have the 36-inch shrubs that are going in. 18 shrubs per 100. I'm sorry, I lost my place. It's a single hedgerow with 36-inch shrubs going in and maintained at 64 to match the right-of-way buffer. So they're similar for compatibility. And then moving on to the western buffer that abuts residential, as well as the southern buffer, which abuts residential. Those buffers are 15-foot wide type C buffer. There's also going to be an 8-foot tall wall. That wall is set back 15 feet. And then there's 5 trees per 100 linear feet and 18 shrubs per 100 linear feet. And the shrubs are maintained at 60 inches, and that's code. So they're meeting code on those 2 sections.
And those are on the external side of the wall?
And those are all required to be on the external side of the wall. So that kind of goes through the land development code for the compatibility with buffering. Looking at the environmental considerations, so the site has some native, a flux code. A flux code gives a number value that describes what that vegetation is. So in this case, the 625E3 is 50 to 75% native. So it does meet the indigenous requirement, and it's hydric pine flatwoods. So anywhere where you see a 6253 on a map, that is considered an indigenous area. So the applicant is preserving the southernmost and impacting the northernmost, which they can do. With the wetland portion, the wetland gets permitted through the South Florida Water Management District. Once they provide where the wetlands are, the applicant will have to mitigate for any impacts to state wetlands. And then, like I mentioned before, this will be planted and restored to provide extra water quality as well as habitat for wildlife and tie into the dry detention areas that will be planted with native grasses. I think I hit on all of those. All landscape vegetation must be native to the 6 Mile Cypress watershed basin. That was Exhibit N in the staff report. And then there also is conditions about the shielding of the lights on the site. So typically photometrics are taken from the property line. There's a condition in there to be taken from the curbing. So that adds another level of protection for wildlife as part of the slough protection.
Are the lighting conditions that are in condition 8, are those all code required, or are those in addition to what the code?
They're in addition, and they're carryovers from the previous. And they are in addition because the cutoffs and that in the type of lighting.
Thank you.
So this is right straight out of the protected species survey that was provided by Terrell. It kind of goes through what it looks like with the warehouse, the 4 buildings, and then the preservation area that is right here. So there's detention here, detention runs up this way. So all of that will be planted with native grasses blending in with the preserve. All of that provides additional water quality. The surface water management plan stated that they are utilizing the preservation area as an additional filtration, an area to pre-treat the water. So it is being designed to utilize that preserve before going into the right-of-way and then eventually in 10 Mile. And touching on some of the wetland policies that I mentioned before, Lead Plan Goal 124 relies on the state permit and the mitigation for state wetland impacts. Goal 123.2 minimizes the clearing to disturbed areas. So we try to, in our review of zoning cases, have applicants impact areas that are not indigenous. But if they're meeting the open space and the indigenous open space per code, then it goes through along with that permit from the state. Touched on the surface water management, Lead Plan Policy 60.1.1. It's required to protect or enhance the groundwater. 126.1.4 talks about the management systems to maintain or improve surface water flows, groundwater levels, and lake levels. 60.4.1 and 60.4.2 using existing or designed green infrastructure. All of this fits into the conditions for planting these detention, which isn't required. It's an option to reduce your general trees in the land development code, and then utilizing this space and restoring this space so that it can provide habitat for wildlife as well as filtration. So with that, staff finds that the request does meet the findings and conclusions for the hearing examiner, and staff recommends approval with the requested conditions.
Thank you. I think you went through everything in detail. The only questions I had left were with regard to the conditions that were being carried over. There were 3 that were omitted, and I just wanted to
Okay.
understand why those weren't carried forward. They related to the hours of operation, outdoor broadcasting, and I think there was a building elevation component previously that they attached for what the buildings would look like. If you can just touch on.
So building elevation, I'll touch on that because previously in 2006 and on, we had a sign package, an elevation package, we had renderings that would come in. And over time, what we find is that it's a rendering. And we have architectural standards in the system that they have to meet. They have to demonstrate at time of development order, as well as the elevations need to meet building code at time of building permit. So that's one of the reasons why we don't have that detail in there anymore. The hours of operation and the broadcast, I'm okay. That's an oversight on my part to go into the hours of operation and the broadcast. Those could be added in if the applicant, wants to speak to that. I'm fine with that.
Okay. I think that was the rest of it. Thank you very much. It was a
Sure.
very detailed staff report. I
Thank you.
appreciate that in presentation.
Thank you.
Did the applicant have any questions of staff at this point?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you need a break before we start? Okay, so with that, I will start calling the cards that I have for public comment. Again, I'm going to call them in the order that I have them. If you wish not to speak and you just wanted to fill the card out to receive a copy of the recommendation, you can indicate that as well. And if I don't have a card for you, when we get to the end, I'll call for anyone else who wants to speak. And I apologize in advance if I butcher names because I do have a tendency to do that. The first one I have is for Terry, I'm going to do it right away, Dirigliano. I very apologize, sir. Thank you. You have them? Oh, beautiful. Okay, thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Terry DiRutigliano. I reside at 7638 Cypress Walk Drive in Fort Myers. At this time, Madam Hearing Examiner, I would wish to submit an exhibit with pages numbered 1 through 5 to be added to the record. I'll be referring to this exhibit by page number during my presentation. I have copies to distribute. May I approach
Yes,
with
please,
them?
thank you. And I will mark those as, as public exhibit number 1. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I'm not walking away from you. Pencil.
Thanks.
Again, my name is Terry DiRutigliano. I serve on the board of the Cypress Walk Neighborhood Association. However, my testimony today is on my own behalf as an individual homeowner. And of note, my home is located just north of Penzance Boulevard, within a 500-foot radius of the proposed rezoning. Preparing for my testimony, I have listened to the audio recording of the informal meeting between the applicant and community planning staff in its entirety. I have also reviewed the application to amend the zoning for Penzance Square and read community planning's response included in the staff report. I concur with the staff report conditioning approval with the revision of the schedule of uses to those listed on attachment E and specifically lined out on attachment F, with noting that the exclusions under personal services remain as originally zoned. Revising and limiting the schedule of uses is essential for compatibility with the surrounding residential communities, those existing and those planned. Referring now to page 1 of my exhibit is a rendering included in the original application and is also found on page 138 of the staff report. It's of Penzance Square as formerly approved by the Board of County Commissioners in 2007. While an artist's interpretation, it serves to illustrate the purpose and intent of Lee County's Article 4 Design Standards and Guidelines for Commercial Buildings and Developments. However, this rendering is misleading as it doesn't illustrate the revised master concept plan submitted by the applicant. On pages 2A and 2B of the exhibit, are renderings illustrating the proposed master concept plan that were provided by the applicant upon request of the attorney representing Cypress Walk Neighborhood Association. These renderings are in stark contrast to the rendering on page 1, having an industrial look and appear to be originally designed for a different site, as the north, south, east, and west orientations are incorrectly stated when referring back to the master concept plan. From Article 4, Section 10600, under Purpose and Intent, on page 3 of my exhibit, I quote, "Massive and/or generic developments that do not contribute to or integrate with the community in a positive manner can be detrimental to a community's image and sense of place." The renderings submitted by the applicant, as shown on pages 2A and 2B, along with the architectural elevations shown on page 2C, have the appearance of being both massive and generic, without any nod to the existing developments along the scenic 6-mile Cypress corridor, from Heritage Palms to Casa del Lago, Cypress Walk, further south to the Becker Office Complex, and on down to Portofino. Additionally, the Penzance Square site is located directly across from the entrance to the 6-mile Cypress Slough, an environmentally sensitive scenic preserve which attracts thousands of visitors to Lee County every year. Exhibited on page 4 and 5 are illustrations from Article 4, Section 10620, with descriptions as to do this and not this. From all appearances, the applicant's renderings serve as an example of not this, without regard for design guidelines consistent with CPD zoning. Quoting now from Article 4, Section 10-620, Paragraph A, Purpose and Intent. The purpose and intent of these provisions is to maintain and complement the streetscape by requiring that buildings be designed with architectural features and patterns that provide visual interest consistent with the community's identity and local character, while reducing the mass/scale of uniform monolithic appearance of large unadorned walls. End of quote. Kindly and simply stated, the architectural appearance of the proposed Penzance Square is out of character with neighboring residential developments. Now I'm moving on to traffic and ingress and egress. The applicant requested a 105% increase of square footage from 90,000 to an aggregate of 185,000 square feet, with ingress and egress only from one access point located on Penzance Boulevard, even though an additional access point on 6-mile Cypress has been affirmed for this site by Lee County Resolution 20-03-10. Dual points of access, with one off 6-mile Cypress and one off Penzance Boulevard, will distribute traffic more efficiently than if only a Penzance Boulevard access point is planned, and vehicle movement within the Penzance Square development for both day-to-day and emergency use will be significantly enhanced. Therefore, I respectfully submit as a condition of approval the requirement of an additional access point for Penzance Square to be included on 6-mile Cypress in consideration of the nearby and planned residential communities which must rely on Penzance Boulevard for commuting. In my conclusion, I affirm the importance, with all of the conditions as set forth in the staff report, being required for the application's approval, which include but are not limited to the schedule of uses as revised by county staff. Additionally, emphasizing that Article 4, design standards and guidelines for commercial buildings and developments be comprehensively adhered to as a condition of approval and as a necessary component for the compatibility of the proposed Penzance Square with the surrounding residential developments and nature preserve. Last, I sincerely request for consideration be given to the long-term quality of life issues for the many current and future residents who will rely upon Penzance Boulevard for commuting, with the condition of approval that 2 access points for ingress and egress be required for Penzance Square, one on Penzance Boulevard and one on 6-mile Cypress. Thank you very much for your attention. I yield to the next speaker.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming today. The next card that I have is for Doreen Falcone. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. My name is Doreen Falcone. I am a resident of 7518 Cypress Walk. I am also a real estate broker in Lee County for over 24 years. I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here as a resident of the community. I have a few things that I'd like to state. Quality of life. Improper mixing of commercial and private residence properties can negatively impact the quality of life for nearby residents, noise pollution, increased traffic, and disruption caused by commercial activities can disrupt the peaceful residential environment. Property value and aesthetics. Mixing commercial elements in residential areas can affect property values. The presence of commercial activities could deter potential buyers and reduce property prices. Additionally, the aesthetic appeal of a residential neighborhood can be compromised by the visual impact of commercial signage, lighting, or storefronts. Community cohesion. Residential neighborhoods are designed to foster a sense of community and provide a safe haven for families. Introducing commercial activities without proper planning and consideration can disrupt the fabric of the community and erode the sense of belonging among the residents. I thank you for your time. That's the end of my comments.
Thank you. Thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you.
The next card I have is for Nick Falcone.
Morning, Madam
Good
Examiner.
morning.
My name is Nick Falcone, 7518 Cypress Walk Drive. I am a real estate agent. I've practiced in Lee County and Collier County for over 21 years. And I can guarantee you that this project is going to devalue the properties in Cypress Walk Drive. I've seen it happen all over the county and other counties. No matter, the presentations have been very impressive. And I know everyone's worked very hard, but this is just a matter of the way things work. And commercial property right next to a housing project is going to devalue the value of those properties. That's all I'd like to bring that point up. Thank you very much.
Today. The next card I have is from Mary Jane Sullivan, or I'm sorry, Scullin. I apologize. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you? I don't know if you want copies of this?
Certainly, I'll take that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Mary Jane Scullin. I too am a member of the board of Cypress Walk, but I am here as a homeowner. My address is 11748 Ibis Walk Lane in Cypress Walk. I'd like to share my concerns about Penzance Square in two areas. First, I want everyone to understand I fully support the developer's right to develop this property, and I understand that that's going to happen. However, as a Cypress Walk resident, I'm particularly concerned about the design and the aesthetics of the buildings being proposed. They do not, in my opinion, fit into the design of the surrounding residential neighborhoods. This development will be surrounded by residential on the north, Cypress Walk, on the west, Coral Rock Apartments, a zoned residential plan development on the south, and the beautiful 6 Mile Cypress Slough on the east. Since the surrounding residential communities will not be engaged after today in the development process, other than a final hearing before the Board of County Commissioners, I'm asking you, the Lee County staff, and you, Madam Hearing Examiner, to ensure this commercial development is in keeping with the aesthetics of our residential communities and not buildings that I'd likely see on Metro. Second, I'd like to address traffic concerns on Penzance Boulevard. I'm not sure if you know, but Penzance is a narrow 0.6 mile, 2-lane road that currently serves entrances and exits for 4 single-family home developments, numerous single-family homes, and 2 pending developments, which I'm not sure were considered in the traffic study, the 90 homes at 81 West Residential Plan Development, where I believe the hearing examiner has recommended moving the entry and exit from Blasingham to Penzance, and the reserve at Penzance, which is a 44-home community currently planned for Penzance and Ranchette, where I believe the request was put on hold because of COVID. I think it was extended. Additionally, Penzance serves as a convenient shortcut for lots of people trying to get to Metro, Plantation, and Colonial, where the commuters want to avoid the traffic on 6 Mile Cypress and Daniels. And finally, the road serves numerous bikers and walkers who use it to get to the bike paths along 6 Mile Cypress. School buses are along that road as well. Penzance simply cannot support the truck and delivery traffic suggested by some of these plans' uses without causing more traffic congestion for our communities along Penzance and safety concerns for our residents. I believe the county's controlled access resolution shows an access point to 6 Mile Cypress. I believe it's 604+5 that appears to correspond to Penzance Square, and it was shown on their originally approved zoning resolution. Again, I'm asking the Lee County staff and you, Madam Hearing Examiner, to again require this access point on 6 Mile Cypress. While I know this may require some reconfiguring and expense on the developer's part to accommodate an ingress and an egress point on 6 Mile Cypress, I believe it's essential for the safety of our area residents and the reduction of the strain on Penzance. My final question, which is somewhat related to this project, is as a resident, I'd like to understand from staff what the plans are for Penzance in its entirety in terms of widening it, turn lanes, that kind of thing. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming this morning, ma'am. I want to make a note one moment of your question. Okay, the next card that I have is for Kathy Cox.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Cox, and I live at 7512 Cypress Walk Drive. I really hadn't planned on talking this morning, but, you know, after I got here and everybody was here, I thought, well, I'd put my 2 cents worth in. I guess probably the biggest thing that
Sorry, I don't
we...
want to interrupt you. If you could just slow down a little bit, we're
okay.
making a record and
Oh,
sometimes
okay.
it's hard to catch.
I was the secretary. I'm sorry.
I want to make sure we catch every word you say because it's
Okay.
important. I apologize.
Thanks so much. I think basically the issue that we all have is just the only entrance onto Penzance. I think we have our home that is with the exit from our community into Penzance. If you're ever there in the morning, and I know they've done traffic surveys, if you're ever there in the morning, there's buses that come up and down, there's people that are coming from all the communities that go up to 6 Mile Cypress. There's walkers, there's bikers, as we've already said. It's a narrow road. I don't know how they're going to be able to put in more, that they're going to have, I lost my train of thought, that there's going to be enough space there for all of these cars. If you get up to Penzance, to 6 Mile Cypress, if you go down to Daniels, sometimes during the season, you're waiting 5 and 6, 7 lights to try to get through Daniels. If you turn left, you go up to Colonial, you end up waiting up there. The traffic, I don't know where their study was from, but the traffic there at that intersection is really, really horrible. Sometimes you have a lot of traffic going back and forth, and I think it's going to only increase. I think the builders come and builders go. Builders kind of come in, they build a piece of property, they leave, they don't worry about the infrastructure. Now, I know we have a lot of people here that have said they have done infrastructure programs. We built a couple houses with builders come in, and then the infrastructure is something that has to be taken care of after the fact. I would like to see the infrastructure done before a project of this magnitude goes in. And after the builders leave, they're on to another project where the homeowners are still going to be there. I've heard all of the testimony today from these people. They say they're experts, but there's been no mention that they have even thought about our community in Cypress Walk or into any of the communities that are up and down on Penzance. So I would really like to hear, they all talk about their little area and what they want to put in there, but they don't really talk about anything else on the outside. And all of the people that are here in the community, that have to be here after the fact, after this project goes in. How long is it going to take to build? We don't know. How long is it going to be before they're filled up? We don't know. Is it going to sit empty? We don't know. There's a lot of commercial properties that are around in the area. They're all sitting empty. There's stores that are going out of commercial property. They're sitting empty. Are we going to have a project there that's just going to sit empty before they have people that come in there and fill up the spaces? They talked about, they talked about how this area is going to help our community. I don't see how it's going to help the community. What's going to be in there that's going to help Cypress Walk? I have a problem with that. Is there a real need to put this kind of a commercial area right next to a residential area? We talk about we need trees for the environment, we need trees for conservation, we need trees. There's a whole area there full of trees, and I'm going to take them all out. So I have a real problem with all of that, and that's really all I have to say. Thank you so much.
For coming this morning. The next card I have is for Rose Madoxon. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Rose Matoxon, and I'm a resident of 7700 Cypress Walk Drive. And I just want to be known that I concur and agree with all the other statements that the residents have made. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for coming today. The next card I have is for Mary Jacqueline Harath. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. I'm Mary Harris. I am also a resident of Cypress Walk and live at 11520 Gray Egret Circle. And I would ask that you consider all the work that has gone into this and really look at the doubling of the square footage for the commercial property that has been proposed, and consider an additional access to the Penzance Square, either via 6 Mile Cypress or Penzance, just because I say 6 Mile Cypress because it seems more feasible, but because of the traffic issues which were previously stated. Thank you.
Thank you. The next card I have is for Lynanne Bedosin. I'm telling you, I have a knack. It's a gift, I think, that I mispronounce names. I apologize.
No problem. My name is Lynanne Baydoun. I reside at 7682 Cypress Walk Drive in Cypress Walk. And I do have one article that I'd like submitted into the record.
Thank you, certainly. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So good morning. Thank you for the opportunity today. So I am aware that the drainage to the 10 Mile Canal is impaired. Doubling the square footage from 90,000 to 185,000 dramatically increases the potential flooding of our surrounding homes. I ask that the original proposal of 90,000 square feet be a condition to approve this project. Also, there are over 200,000 people from all over the world that visit our beautiful slough every year. I would like to share with you an article, which I presented a copy of, from a Canadian newspaper that was published earlier this month. And I quote, "The 6 Mile Cypress Slough came as a complete surprise. Who would have imagined that there would be this astonishing nature preserve right in the heart of Fort Myers, a Florida city known for its beaches and resort hotels. But there it was and is. This highly unexpected 6 Mile Cypress Slough is just waiting to show the wonders of natural Florida," end quote. The proposed building design and signage is in direct conflict with what the slough presents, Florida in nature. In order to preserve and present a cohesive aesthetic, thick foliage must be used to minimize the view of these buildings from 6 Mile Cypress and Penzance roads, as well as the many tourists and visitors to the area. Lastly, The businesses that will reside at this development must have business hours that respect the lives of the residents in the communities. For example, the beeping sound of trucks backing up at 6 a.m. is not the kind of alarm I want. Also, the types of businesses allowed should not require a lot of vehicle traffic in order to maintain road and pedestrian safety. Considering there is only one access in and out of this development poses safety issues as well. And I ask, please take a moment as a city official, how do you want one of the top tourist destinations in our city to be viewed as a result of this building? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, thank you. The next card I have is for Stephen Mashad. Oh my goodness, I was due one. I butchered the last few. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Michaud. I live at 7620 Cypress Walk Drive. That's lot number 84. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning regarding Penzance Square. Although I have several concerns about the property in this development, my major concern is safety. I realize that the site developer has done a survey, a traffic survey, but basically Penzance Boulevard is my front yard, and I see the traffic in the morning and in the afternoon, and it does back up, and that's the way it is right now. We have more developments coming in. It's only going to impact this more. Again, the safety fact here. God forbid if there's a fire in this facility. Everybody's coming down Penzance Boulevard, and the general consensus is people are going to run from the fire. Where are the fire trucks going to get in there? They're coming down Penzance Boulevard, and they've got to cross over an oncoming lane. It's not a good idea. And again, this is just for safety. I would much prefer to see an access off of 6 Mile Cypress where they'd have to turn in right, and all the outgoing traffic would be coming out and turning right in the same direction away from the fire. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming today. The next card I have is for Jan Struve. Oh, no. So short-lived. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Jean Struve, and I reside at 7664 Cypress Walk Drive. And I concur with everything that has been said, especially what Steve and Mary Jane as board members put together. My concerns are also for the traffic, but probably one of my biggest concerns is the landscaping. From Penzance to our property, there's a berm, and there is no berm in that I could tell that has been added into the landscaping, and just raising it and then putting all the landscaping that has already been recommended would make a big difference between that buffer. The other thing, I understand something was said about warehouse hours and then other hours of the development, and we have been given no information on the hours, so I do have a question about the hours of occupation, because a lot of warehouses are 24 hours, and that's something that we're very concerned about. Again, I concur with everything else that's been said, but those are my major additions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next card I have is for Mike Struve. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Mike Struve. I also reside at 7664 Cypress Walk Drive. I've been in the planning profession for about 30 years, and I've been a certified planner since 2005, but I'm here to speak in my own personal capacity this morning. First of all, I want to compliment staff. I think they've done a very good job of reviewing this project. These projects are always very difficult to evaluate and to strike the proper balance. I'm going to limit my comments today to the proposed schedule of uses and compatibility of the project with the surrounding area. With one exception, I encourage you to support the schedule of uses identified by staff that appear in attachment E of the staff report. These uses individually are relatively low traffic generators, which is important given Penzance is relatively narrow. And I understand that's a collector roadway now, but the width of the pavement itself is about 20 feet. Shoulders are lacking on much of that roadway, so it does function a little bit differently than a lot of traditional collectors. The uses that are proposed by staff, and as I understand also the developer concurs with, do not allow for the storage of outdoor materials that will help improve the aesthetics of the development and potentially reduce nearby resident concerns with noise associated with the development. I do recommend that one use, many warehouse uses, be allowed with conditions. Lee County defines this use as any building designed or used to provide individual storage units with separate exterior doors, being the key here, as the primary means of access to individuals or businesses for a fee. If this use is to be allowed in the CPD, I recommend that the use be allowed provided that all exterior doors be conditioned, or be screened, I should say, with a wall from the 6 Mile Parkway right-of-way. This type of screening provision is relatively common for this type of use, for the length of these buildings are lined with exterior roll-up doors, and absent of screening, both the doors and loading activities would be visible to the public from this heavily traveled roadway. Now I want to transition for just a moment and talk about compatibility. Within a half mile of the intersection of Penzance and 6 Mile Cypress are the entrances to 4 residential subdivisions and 2 small multifamily developments. And Ms. Workman did a good job, I think, of describing that area. Beyond or west of these 6 developments, large lot single-family homes are present as the character of the area becomes more rural. As the commercial intensity on this site will double under this amendment compared to previously granted entitlements, I encourage you to support a more robust buffer than what is being recommended by staff for the north property line of the site. This can be accomplished by requiring a 3 to 4 foot tall berm along the north property line. Within the 25 foot wide buffer recommended by county staff, it appears sufficient land area exists to accommodate such a berm with a 3 to 1 slope without resulting in any significant adjustment to the design of the project in regards to the existing parking, drive aisle, and building placement. This buffer will better conceal activities occurring within the site compared to the Type D landscape buffer that is recommended, and will eliminate light intrusion from headlights as a row of parking is located directly behind the current buffer as shown on the master concept plan. Furthermore, the buffer will provide symmetry with the buffer that exists on the opposite side of Penzance Boulevard along the Cypress Walk community and will help protect the residential character of the corridor. Since the CPD does not allow restaurant and the types of retail uses where site visibility can be important to capture impulse-related purchasers from motorists that tend to pass by sites and tend to impulsively stop, this berm should not be detrimental to the businesses within the project, but will improve the overall compatibility of the project with the surrounding area and make for a more attractive development. Thank you this morning for your time and your consideration.
Thank you for coming today. The next card I have is for Afa Amra. Goodness, I'm on a roll today. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Examiner. My name is Haifa Amra. I reside at 7658 Cypress Walk Drive, which is within the 500 feet notification zone. I am a remote employee, so I am home all day. I work out of my house. There are a couple issues that I have, but first of all, I do want to thank the staff report for the changes to the usages because I did have concerns with all those additions. My real concern is the design and how it meets the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Being mostly residential, I mean, the fire department is even a much better, beautiful building than what is being proposed. So, and I walk up and down that corridor, I do a morning walk, so I do see everything. I have concerns with warehouse. I mean, my previous residence was in Boston. I was between two warehouses, so I don't know if it's 24/7. I know I had a unit there. I went in there whenever I wanted to. So I have concerns with that, concerns with the lighting, concerns with being able to see it off the road. Any kind of signage, how it affects the wildlife. And then the slough. Every single one of my family that comes here loves the slough. It gets 200,000 visitors a year. It's the #2 on TripAdvisor for what to do in Fort Myers. So I have concerns about that. And of course, the traffic. I can hear it from my house, so I know it's traffic. That's a big intersection, and I have concerns of actually the need of it. I mean, all you have to do is go north to the colonial area. There's tons of places there. There's lots of open units. You go south, you go to Daniels area, and there's tons of units there. So I know it is zone commercial, so that is fine. I just feel the design layout, the increased square footage is just not compatible with the corridor. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, thank you. Next one I have is for Karen Suzor. Good job. I'm trying. Please know I'm trying. I really am. Good morning.
Good morning. I am Karen Shaw Suzor. I live at 11602 Gray Egret Circle. I am here to support my neighbors, my friends, and concur with everything that has been put forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming this morning. The next card I have is for Ed DeMond. Desmond? Yes.
No comment at this time, except that I agree with all the other residents on what everybody's concerns are.
Thank you, sir. And Katie Berkey?
And I'm happy to go last if folks
Okay.
need to head back to work. They can go ahead of me in line.
Okay, I'll move that to the last card. So then I have David Minnick. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Examiner. Thank you much for your time today. My name is David Minnick. I'm here today as a member of the board of the Friends of the 6 Mile Cypress Slough Preserve. Our purpose as Friends of the Slough is to, quote, preserve, protect, and promote the slough, a real treasure in the Lee County Parks and Recreation System. I'm joined here today by my fellow board member, Ms. Sabine Vandenhenden, who also serves as our board president. And I'd like to focus my comments today on the invaluable role that the slough plays as a preserve in Lee County and the possible risk to the slough by the proposed development. Every morning, and beginning about 1 hour before sunset every evening, visitors to the slough witness the migration of thousands of birds, leaving in the morning and returning to the rookery, which lines Gator Lake on one side in the evening. Birds seek out the slough because it is dark, quiet, and safe at night. So one concern we have is with the proposed development is the potential impact of additional lighting along the 6 Mile Cypress Parkway. Today we are grateful for the efforts being made to limit lighting along the 6 Mile corridor. Those efforts up till now have found a good balance of lighting for public safety and also for protecting the integrity of the preserve. There are numerous well-researched, well-respected studies on the impact of unnatural light and noise on biodiversity. And our concern is not just with the birds that find their homes in the preserve, but on the entire ecosystem, ranging from insects to reptiles, all of whom have a critical place in the ecosystem at the preserve. So we're appreciative of the many efforts made in the proposal to respect that, but this does remain a major concern of us, and we hope there will be more reassurances around all this. One other matter related to our concern about lighting has to do with the possible 45-foot warehouse facing 6 Mile Parkway in the slough. It is our understanding that up to 10% of the wall facing the slough could have signage, and that could be backlit. and we're still trying to assess and sort out the impact, the possible impact that that might have on the slough and our system. Another concern is will the landscaping along 6 Mile Parkway as well as along Penzance Drive be sufficient to create an effective visual barrier to those traveling along those busy roads? As a stop along the Great Florida Birding Trail, the slough is open dawn to dusk so that visitors can come at the best time to see and appreciate the diversity of the birds we are known for. And we do get a great number of visitors in that period for that very purpose. Now, those times can vary throughout the year, ranging from about 6:30 a.m. to 8:40 p.m. in mid-June to 7:24 to 5:30 in mid-December. As these times impact the natural migration of birds, we are eager to know the precise operating hours of the proposed development. We at the slough have a respectful rivalry with our friends at the Edison Ford Estates as to who will be listed number 1 on TripAdvisor's Things to See and Do Fort Myers website. We eagerly welcomed 282,000 visitors in 2022 to enjoy the beauty of the preserve, to learn the impact of the slough on water quality and movement in Lee County, and to enjoy our boardwalk, butterfly garden, and interpretive center. Please note that those 282,000 visitors came in a year when we were open only 11 months because of Hurricane Ian. Our volunteers work hard and faithfully to protect, promote, and preserve this special park in our community. And I encourage you to read the comments on TripAdvisor website to learn of how favorably impressed so many of our guests are. If you're on Facebook, follow us there, where some of our 2,500 members post pictures daily of the wonders that they find in the slough. So with that in mind, our concern is that visitors leaving the beauty of the slough, our boardwalk, buildings, and grounds, coming onto the well-cared-for 6 Mile Parkway, and seeing a series of buildings dwarfed by a 3-story warehouse might be their lasting impression as they leave our wonderful park. So I hope that the concerns raised here by me and by others will be considered as this process moves forward. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, sir, for coming today. The next card I have is for Luth Klingenberger. Good morning.
I also have a written presentation I'd like to share with both the stenographer and you, if that's all right.
Thank you, certainly.
All right. Yours comes with a lovely picture of my home.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm new to this whole zoning thing, and this has really been a great opportunity to meet Ms. Workman. I appreciate so much. Oh, I don't want to thank you for that. My name is Ruth Klingenberger, and I am a resident of Cypress Walk neighborhood. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak during this public comment period. Madam Hearing Examiner Rivera, I have some concerns regarding the proposed amendment to the commercially planned development CPD, which I would ask you to consider. In 2017, my husband Herman and I moved into the Cypress Walk neighborhood as year-round residents. Our home address is 7560 Cypress Walk Drive, which is immediately north of the proposed Penzance Square CPD and its proposed ingress and egress. You'll see I'm 5 from Bent Willow Lane, and it's the one that has a pool. So you go over one more, there, that's Herman and myself. Our primary concern is the traffic. The applicant requested an increase in square footage, We've discussed that. And it's not to exceed their vehicle per hour traffic study. We understand that, and that's a good plan. But from my research, I learned that it was a special commercial office district under Lee County Land Development Code, and you've got the reference there, section 34841I. The purpose and the intent of CS1 zoning facilitates standard office spaces for a variety of uses, includes a minimum level of retail, sales, and personal services. These uses will necessitate access from an arterial or high-volume collector road. The CS1 district is designed to buffer residential developments from higher intensity uses. Using commercial vehicles and trucks would be disruptive to surrounding residential neighborhoods. Most surrounding properties are 1 to 2 story residential plan developments, and thus the 3-story building would be out of character for our neighborhood. And today I've now learned that the property to the south of Penzance Square is also going to be residential. The revised master concept plan eliminates the ingress-egress onto the Benzie Spratt 6 Mile Cypress Parkway, an arterial roadway, and proposes to make the sole egress onto 2-lane Penzance Boulevard. However, if it's conditioned to build the mini storage facility as close to the southern property line, then it would abut a commercial property. Well, no longer true. And I thought that would be a step down from the 45-foot height would be acceptable. From my reading of the functional classifications of roadways AC 11-1, Section 3, I note that Penzance Boulevard was defined as a county-maintained major collector, and we've also discussed that today. Primary purpose, collecting and distributing traffic from connecting streets to the nearest arterial, which is 6 Mile Cypress. Its secondary purpose is to carry moderate volumes of through traffic. So providing an access to abutting lands is a lesser secondary function. Penzance is not a high-volume collector as required for easy access under CS1. The original MCP as approved has an ingress-egress onto 6 Mile Cypress. It is my opinion that the original ingress-egress should remain as originally approved, protecting road capacity on Penzance Boulevard. There are already many abutting properties. You have between 6 Mile and Ranchette, J.V. Parker Lane, Coral Rock, Coral Woods, and Coral Waters apartment buildings, Bent Willow Lane, which goes into Cypress Walk, Wine Palm Road, which goes into Heritage Palms, Blasingham Road, which is a private, Honeysuckle Road, a private, Timberline Circle, also an RPD, Solano Drive, Windsong RPD ingress and egress. Additional traffic burden will arise from the residential development Addison Square RPD, which is under construction at Idlewild Street and Plantation Road, as well as the anticipated RPD at the corner of Penzance and Ranchette Road. Idlewild, a major collector from Metro Parkway to Ranchette Road, shunts traffic onto Ranchette Road and then feeds traffic onto Penzance, a major collector which subsequently moves traffic onto 6 Mile Cypress, a principal arterial, from Colonial Boulevard to Metro Parkway. So the Idlewild to Ranchette to Penzance, the 6 Mile Cypress route is already being used as a cut-through to bypass the heavy traffic and back up on 6 Mile and Daniels Parkway. Excess traffic endangers bicyclists and pedestrians, as well as local wildlife. My husband and I enjoy viewing the Muscovy ducks and wood storks and snowy egrets, blue herons. I even saw a roseate spoonbill and white ibis and others as we travel along Penzance and Ranchette roads. As I understand from my cursory reading of the Manual of Uniform Minimum Standards for Design, Construction, and Maintenance for Streets and Highways, the Florida Green Book, I noted that there is supposed to be a lane width of 11 to 12 feet per lane in a 35-mile-per-hour zone to accommodate traffic flow. And as with all the neighborhoods, it's imperative that school buses, ambulance, and fire trucks have unimpeded access onto Penzance, as well as connecting roadways. Both the C3 suburban and C4 urban general categories share the same requirements. And I quote, travel lanes, note 1, minimum 11-foot travel lanes on designated freight corridors or when truck volume exceeds 10% with design speeds 25 to 35 miles per hour, end quote. The proposed MCP with its 4 flex buildings and a 3-story mini storage warehouse is a concern. To accommodate traffic entering onto Penzance Boulevard from 6 Mile Cypress, a left turn lane on Penzance Boulevard would be required to accommodate increased traffic flow. However, if this lane cannot be added within the confines of the current easement, it would demand necessary expense to widen Penzance Boulevard and maintain the 11-foot minimum for each lane. Realistically, it would be impossible to encroach on property to the north of Penzance Boulevard with its residential gated entrance, landscaping, berm, and plantings. This action would then critically narrow the width of Cypress Walk Drive as a protected state reserve is abutting directly north of our backyard. And we're not going into that area. Conversely, any lane addition would also encroach on land south of Penzance, affecting Coral Woods Apartments if the easement cannot cannot accommodate an added turn lane. Since the county maintains Penzance Boulevard, this would be an unnecessary financial burden to Lee County, or, if conditioned, for the applicant. The construction site from the ingress-egress currently proposed by Penzance Square CPD lies in a direct northward line toward our home. There is a berm with plantings north of Penzance Boulevard, south of our home, but when we sit on our front porch or we utilize the northern outdoor space in our backyard, the traffic noise is quite audible and noticeable. Adding more traffic will create more traffic noise and disrupt the ease of transit, lessening the enjoyment of our home and property. Per the traffic impact statement, Penzance Boulevard has a speed limit of 35, 2-lane roadway, and the chart, operational intersection analysis results, Penzance Boulevard and 6 Mile Cypress Parkway demonstrate how this project would have a significant impact west of 6 Mile Cypress, but not further west beyond the project site. However, 6 Mile Cypress would not have a significant impact either east of Penzance to Daniels Parkway, nor west of Penzance to Winkler Road. May I respectfully request that the residential Penzance Boulevard not be burdened with an ingress-egress for a commercial development when traffic could so easily be handled off of 6 Mile Cypress Parkway. Second concern is the permitted uses of Penzance Square CPD. And I've looked at the Land Development Code, both in Division 1 and Division 9. Okay. Except indicated to the contrary, regulations for planned development districts may be permitted in the indicated districts when consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Lee Plan. That makes sense. And I want to give, oh, thank you, sweetheart. My thanks to all staff who recommended removal of some of the uses as they felt these items were not compatible with the residential surrounding neighborhoods. With respect, I have my own schedule of uses. Accessory uses, buildings and structures, and administrative offices, no contest there. Banks and financial establishments, Group 1 does include the ATMs, and Group 2, no problem there. Business services, including computer data processing. I did have a question about the parcel and express services. I would like an exception to UPS, FedEx, large groups like that. Group 1 exceptions, again in the business services, bail bonds, advertising, sign construction, blood banks, blood donor stations, check exchanges, collection agencies, detective agencies, oxygen tent services, personal investigation services. I feel uncomfortable with those as uses. Cleaning and maintenance services, no repairs, that's fine. Contractor and builders group, I see no problem with Group 1. Cultural facilities, art galleries and museums would be a nice addition. Essential service facilities, excavation, water retention. My question was between the benefit from dry retention versus wet retention. I'm not familiar with that. Fences and walls, I assume that meant what they were going to build around the property line. Insurance companies, non-store retailers, those are fine. Personal services, now that's where we get a little back to the scratching out. Coin-operated laundries, laundromats, and massage establishments. They came under Group 1, Group 2, and I do not feel that that would be an appropriate use. I'm sorry to see that Ms. Workman put it back in. Group 3 exception, sale or rental service of health-related devices only. Group 4 exception, escort services, palm readers, fortune tellers, card readers, tattoo parlors. And post office, I couldn't find the section in 34, but I think that's a great idea as long as it's limited to an accessory use. Rental or leasing establishment, no passenger car pickup and drop off. Repair shops, Group 1, Group 2. Signs, I wasn't sure exactly what that referred to other than no manufacturing. Social services, Group 1, excluding public welfare centers, I concur. Studios, and then temporary uses. There's a lovely little bit of reading for that. And then again with the mini warehouse, that seems to be fine. As far as the permitted hours of use of Penzance Square, construction hours of operation, I'm not asking for anything conditioned because that's a whole other field I'm not familiar with. Mini storage facility, from an internet survey I did, and it's not an official survey, it's just my looking online. They generally advertised hours for their offices from 9:30 to 6, but then they had access hours from 6 to 10. Then they had 24/7 electronic surveillance and gated entry with codes. And I would ask that it be conditioned that they would not be allowed to access the property after 10 o'clock at night. I would like it a lot earlier than that, but you know, I got to be realistic here. So please condition the ingress and egress to these hours of operation Monday to Saturday to prevent 24-hour access to self-storage. This will allow access without disrupting the neighborhood. Flex Space Business also did an informal survey online. Edison Mall does hours from 11 to 7. Columbus Square is 10 to 8:30. Shops of Village Walk are 7 to 10. They are highly retail. Please condition the office hours of operation to Saturday, Monday to Saturday, 8:30 to 6, to prevent disruption to the neighborhood. There, of course, are always exceptions, especially with construction. I understand that. Landscaping buffers, boy, I really concur with all the comments that have been made. There have been some really good ones. Having an elevated buffer along with the double rows of shrubs and the 16-foot double row. I would like a double row of 5 trees and stagger them, so that we would have a well-maintained barrier. And then again, just as staff proposed, the 36 height maintained at 64 for the shrubs. And rather than propose an 8-foot wall along that in front of our subdivision, Cypress Walk, let's keep it shrubbery and trees.
I don't want to interrupt you. There's not a wall, is there?
There's no wall against Penzance.
Okay, I just wanted to. The wall that they were talking about was along the west.
Yes.
I just wanted to know.
Well, I'm just saying, you know, if they, it would be less expensive than a wall. So, my concern number 5 is drainage, and I believe that's been covered quite well. I put on that map of our home the 2 levels that we got flooding in the driveway. The first one was Hurricane Irma. The second was Hurricane Ian. Whatever they did improved things, so I'm thankful for that. But I still would not want to see it go up again and into the house. It's my understanding the LEAP plan and the LDC will assure the best possible drainage in any planned development. It'd be costly to build for the worst possible scenario, but reasonable evaluation needs to prevent unnecessary drainage impacting the homes and apartment buildings near Penzance Square. Will the proposed flex buildings be built at the same elevation as homes in Cypress Walk so that we're not at a disadvantage with which to begin? And I was not able to locate the elevation level for our home, so I'm not sure what that is, but, you know, I don't want to see them build like 12 feet higher than us. Lighting photometrics, since we're going to be directly across an ingress egress that would go in to Penzance, please keep the lighting minimal before and after hours of operation so that it doesn't negatively impact the homes on Penzance Boulevard directly across from your project. Environmental, I noticed on that really nice report that they did not have anything about the gopher tortoise burrows. Now, the gopher tortoise is found in all 67 counties across Florida. So, you know, right now they're not endangered anymore, they're considered threatened. But I did see a notation, or I did not see a notation, rather, from the environmental supplement prepared by Turtle Hall and Associates as to whether inhabited or disinhabited tunnels were noted for the tortoise. Relocation programs are available in Florida if they do find one during the process of construction. Slough Preserve is located at 7751 Penzance Boulevard, directly to the west of the signalized intersection, and it's a gem. I request emphatically that the enhancement be conditioned to the approval of the development order so that we do in fact get the 25-foot buffer and the 16-foot trees that are above what it would be normally requested by code. Drainage, we've covered that quite a bit, and I concur with all that's been said so far. And signage, again, I concur with keeping it all facing onto Cypress, 6 Mile Cypress, and not making it visible from our homes in the neighborhood. 9, the value of property. I was very happy to hear your comments on that, both Falcones. And I just want to close with kudos to the staff and to the applicant who spent a lot of time and effort preparing everything, and everyone who's shown up today. I'm real proud of my neighborhood. And that Ms. Beth Workman, who answered all my questions and facilitated my education in zoning, and any misinterpretation in my testimony is due solely to my own error. And unless the master concept plan is conditioned as the staff recommends and considerations of additional public comment, Penzance Square CPD, as proposed by Q. Grady Minor and Associates, will negatively affect our neighborhood and the enjoyment of our home and property. Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner, for your attention and considering my comments.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for coming today. Yeah, we've been at this about 2 hours now, so we're going to take a brief break. So we'll reconvene at 11:15 in 10 minutes.
Ediyor
The other thing is,
I was going to suggest when presentation is suggesting, let's just make it instead of 5%, let's just make it 80%. Just eliminate the old and then you can do whatever you need. No, they could do 3 buildings, 2 and then 1 going this way that would face it. You give them that. This is just very inexpensive.
Obviously, right. I just want to make sure. Yeah, just that's me. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for presenting your concern.
We gave them more buffer than they
public broadcasting, building elevation, yeah, broadcasting. You don't need it.
Right. Nobody has outside speakers yet.
So we're then hearing. So the building elevation is we now have architectural standards that are part of it.
We'll meet them all the way down. We all set the sign. Meet their requirements of their building.
Yeah. And I think whatever that design was clearly designed.
Training. We go from, you've got to remember, when that first road was there, we were going to be flex on retail on the other side, flex on that, and then warehouse and heritage. That's what I was doing. But then the market just never came over. So in turn, that was pushing force laterals. Exactly. Now they don't want to go force laterals. Seriously, they don't. We don't want them driving through a block. It's so realistic. just walk. I mean, I don't want the people to stop it, and I don't want them to mess it up. Because somebody could be backing up and I see them, boom, you hit them. Next thing they're so
So the several comments that fall in that same category of parking.
It's flat. It's just because they have to. She went 5 feet up. She just had.
Somebody had some.
No,
I mean, does Michael have like a couple foot fire built in there?
This lot was purchased in 2005 for $1,738,000.
Nope, they're out to their,
Not that elevation.
I
For the previous development,
think
for
starting
right of way
September,
cost was a
October
reassessment.
time.
So it never happened. But they've only been paying $60 a year because they put in their agricultural.
Yeah, isn't that
And that little lot, that little triangle lot. I sent them a letter and I said, Controlled by Trust, they're paying over $1,100 in real estate taxes for that lot, but they can't even build on it unless they go through this Penzance.
I get
And they bought that in the 90s.
There's some arrangements.
Take the money and just sell it to them and. Because they're.
Oh, they are. I looked at it. The first one.
Wanted to look at it.
Article 14.
In the old time, we would do retail and bottom.
So those aren't represented.
These look like something you'd see on the airport.
Then number two, that was made.
Did you see?
Yeah, the other night, yeah. I have, yeah, no, that's what. Those pictures.
I'm sorry, Mary's.
Right, who's rebelling?
Oh, thank you. You've done this before. No, it's my first time. But it's kind of fun.
Oh, no, he's gonna be out
Money if you can get it.
I have to thank Katie for that too, because she provides me with a lot of references to the article. Variety, yeah, for the design, yeah, that totally, like, because I would have just been talking to my own personal preference. But at least, now I could actually state it right.
Yeah, I'm going to simply say the suggestion that somebody is not going to yield to an ambulance, police officer, or fireman. We all start to yield to police, and they will have the right of way. And that argument can be made about any, the residential projects.
Traffic violations,
We'll just leave it there.
We're going to be vacant. I don't know, go look at all their products. You find some of the vacant. Well, like, they obviously do not know you.
No, that's what I want to hear.
Let's go, 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 and whoop, done.
Well, maybe that's what we should do too. They don't know. They're concerned about us. I think that's consistent with what we've already said.
You realize you're gonna like
I think that would be a good one. Yeah, I think that's a good one. I agree. I like that.
The reason why we didn't put one big building in there, it's all the little ones.
By the way, the architecture mostly doesn't differentiate between like what type of, use someone can use for commercial. No, it doesn't. But I'm just saying, it's got labor requirements, blah, blah, blah. The only thing we did survey
Are you sure?
Eagles are making roofs, bald eagles are making roofs private, constructed residential housing.
I could get an appraisal done.
Their ratio, it's a course that never ever thought that would be this good.
They never stopped capturing it. Is that like the migration style right now? They were, I mean,
The world's coming to an end.
There must have been
Yeah, they were just everywhere. Never seen that. I mean, you see it.
Okay. Let's get going. Oh no.
Okay, if everybody can take your seats, we're getting ready to begin. Thank you.
Intermission is over.
Intermission is over. Please take your seats. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we are back on the record. The next card I had was for Mitch Weiner. Good morning.
Good morning. My name's Mitch Weiner. I'm 11712 Ibis Walk Lane. I basically concur with everything that's been said. I could start at point one, but
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And the next card I have is for Penny Lynch.
I'm the easy name to say.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the perfectly timed bathroom break, too. But thank you for hearing us out today. I live in Cypress Walk. I'm at 7542 Cypress Walk Drive. I moved to Florida, started snowbirding 10 years ago, and my first condo was over by the airport, by the Red Sox Stadium. Then I moved 8.5 miles due west, and I'm now at the Twins Stadium. But that drive down from 41 down 6 Mile Cypress all the way up to Colonial is a nice drive. You, especially where we live with the slough across from us and stuff, we get so many visitors. And one of my concerns with that is that in season, you will get several cars that will park on 6 Mile Cypress. When this becomes a commercial building area, and I will say I would be one of the guilty ones, free parking over there. Don't have to pay the $5 or $10 an hour to park at the slough, and I can walk over there. So my concern is safety for people who will do that and take over the slough and someone getting killed. The thing with all the things they're suggesting of building in there is the hours are concerned again as well. Early morning, if it's freight stuff going in, those trucks leave early to get out on the road to miss traffic as well. You're going to hear the backup beeping, which is annoying. And just the traffic coming in and out. Penzance is a very tough road to begin with. Sometimes it tends to be a road people like to speed on. We had a car flip. I'm right at the back gate. We had a young lady that flipped her car because she was going so fast, and I don't know. It's just not a good place. The other thing I have is we also have a bus stop that's right at our back gate that picks kids up and drop them off in the afternoon. How is that going to affect traffic on the road at that time? The emergency vehicles getting in and out, especially with only one entrance and exit to the thing, is very concerning. You have 114 homes in just our development. You have, if it's what time of the day it is, how many people are going to be parked in there for businesses, and then all the other developments up and down that street. It's going to be a nightmare. And the last thing is that when I first moved here, I lived over in Gateway, and I bought into a condominium that I thought was a new development. Come to find out, I'd been sitting there for 7 years already. They just finished building it out, and it's how many years later. The traffic on Daniels and Colonial is an absolute nightmare, and we're just adding more cars to this every time we build something. One thing I would like to see is start offering developers tax breaks or something to take over all these vacant buildings that are everywhere. Westlinks, that was the way to get into my development. I hated that drive because it was so ugly because there's all these vacant buildings sitting there with nothing. And sometimes developers will come in and push for extra space, and they don't even end up developing it, but they figure they can get more money for their land if they've already got it approved for what they want to use. And we just thank you for listening to all of us today.
Thank you. Thank you for coming this morning. The last card I had is for Katie Berkey. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Katie Berkey. I'm a board-certified city, county, and local government attorney and a certified land planner at Becker and Polikoff. My office, coincidentally, is right at the intersection of 6 Mile Cypress at Carissa, so just leapfrogging Carissa RPD, and that's where my office sits as well, and my resume is on file already with the hearing examiner's office. I'm here today proudly representing Cypress Walk Neighborhood Association. As already discussed, they're the residential HOA directly across Penzance from the project. And I first want to thank staff for their very thoughtful review of this case and careful consideration of the schedule of uses and conditions of approval, and for hearing the residents' concerns over the last several weeks, and also to McGarvey Development, who has been open to communicating with us outside of the hearing. Despite the improvements to the schedule of uses and the conditions of approval, we believe that the proposal in its current form still is injurious to the surrounding area as discussed by the many residents, without additional protections being afforded. First, as touched on already, the hours of operation. The original CPD conditions of approval as Exhibit L to the staff report provide that the hours of operation for all commercial uses on the subject property are limited to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And as part of the applicant's resubmittal on the companion DO case, DOS 2023-00036, dated June 23rd, the applicant indicated that they would adhere to those hours of operation. But we ask that the applicant further clarify whether the hours of operation will include deliveries, pickups, and solid waste collection for the property, and also wonder if they could be reduced perhaps to 7 to 9 on weekdays as compared to weekends. And we also ask that the hours of operation be included affirmatively as a condition of approval. Second, dumpster capacity. The LDC requires 1,494 square feet of solid waste area based on the proposed building square footages, but per the filings from the applicant as part of the companion development order case, the applicant is only proposing 864 square feet of total dumpster area, and was seemingly approved by email for this deviation from the code requirements by Lee County Solid Waste. However, given the proximity to the slough, in particular, residents are concerned about the potential for nuisance accumulation if that capacity is insufficient, and also the potential for attracting wildlife to the waste receptacles, especially given the intensity of the project more than doubling, but then the proposed dumpster capacity being reduced by almost 42%. We ask that the dumpster capacity provided comply with the code and be included as a condition of approval. Third, drainage and discharge to the 10-mile canal. And if I may, the 10-mile canal is identified by FDEP as an impaired water body, meaning it doesn't meet applicable water quality standards under the Florida Administrative Code. And there are pollution limits and discharge requirements for impaired water bodies. And with that, I would like to submit the FDEP list of impaired basins in Lee County, with 10-mile canal being highlighted in yellow.
Thank you. As I understand from the applicant's materials, drainage from the project will be routed along Penzance and then to the canal along 6 Mile Cypress, and will eventually discharge into the 10-mile canal. And I know we've touched on, or Mr. Herrera did, with respect to drainage in general, but I ask for the record if the applicant can please confirm that the drainage and stormwater management infrastructure will meet or exceed the district and county requirements, especially given the impaired designation of 10-mile canal. Fourth, lighting. The applicant indicated to the association outside of today's hearing that they use dawn to dusk timers for their other projects and was willing to prohibit backlighting for on-building signs and the monument sign, or at least backlit on-building signage for buildings 1 and 2, which face Penzance, and then the monument sign that'll be at the northeast corner of the property. We ask that these restrictions be incorporated as conditions of approval consistent with the original CPD zoning approval that prohibits all backlit signs. Fifth, compatibility in landscaping. As discussed by the first speaker, who lives in Cypress Walk, the renderings provided by the applicant are in no way similar or compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, particularly the architectural style of the existing multifamily to the west, Coral Rock,
Cypress Walk to the north, and even that of my own office, just one property south of the Carissa RPD. The architectural treatment proposed offers no undulation, no architectural interest, and just includes straight contiguous walls without any roof variation. The renderings provided to the association by the applicant and the elevations provided as part of the companion development order reflect a style that's more appropriate, as other speakers have mentioned, along Tree Line and Metro Parkway. And they're very much a great departure from the aesthetic presented as part of the original CPD approval that included arches and columns and other details. We ask that the applicant comply with the design standards and guidelines for commercial buildings and development under section 10-600 of the LDC. And it's worth noting too that the original design for the CPD proposed the one contiguous kind of L-shaped building with just the narrowest side of the building facing Cypress Walk, whereas now the residents are seeing the broadest side of those first two buildings plus the added height of the warehouse behind. To further mitigate any remaining architectural incompatibilities and the remaining blend of uses, we ask that the applicant further consider supplementing the proposed buffer along Penzance with additional vegetation like the other speakers had mentioned. That could be in the form of the hedges being planted at a height of 48 inches in height, and again being maintained as staff recommends at 64 inches in height, but also with an elevated berm. One of the earlier speakers had suggested 3 to 4 feet for additional screening. That would allow for a more continuous visual screening of the uses within, but also the headlights in the parking lot that would face directly into the backyards of many of the residents in Cypress Walk. Lastly, traffic circulation and access. And as discussed previously, the vacant triangular CS2 zoned property is outside of this project area. It's identified as 11900 6 Mile Cypress, excuse me, and will very likely require access through this CPD given how close to the intersection it is. The CS2 zoning permits uses like administrative offices, banks and financial institutions, business services group 1, essential services and medical offices, which do tend to be high traffic, trip generators by right, for example. So given the interconnection between those two properties in particular, the residents naturally were upset to see loss of that pre-planned, pre-approved additional access point onto 6 Mile Cypress. And for background, Lee County Controlled Access Resolution number 20-03 -10 for 6 Mile Cypress, which, if I may, I'm going to submit to the record.
Is that the controlled access facility ordinance? Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, it's so big.
Printer error. Printer error.
The Lee County Controlled Access Resolution identifies an access point to serve Penzance Square, and it's identified in Exhibit A and depicted on Exhibit B as 604+05. To better distribute traffic from Penzance Square and the adjacent property, the triangular piece, should it later be developed, we ask that the original access point directly onto 6 Mile be reincorporated into the site design consistent with the prior CPD approval as a second access point. Marcus Evans, infrastructure planning engineer on the county's witness list, advised by phone earlier this week that he had spoken to Lee County DOT staff, and they indicated that they would not object to keeping this original access point as it's contemplated in the controlled access resolution. And if there are questions on that, Mr. Evans could be called to discuss further. And Mr. Evans had indicated that if the applicant were willing to redesign the site to include that access point, it would serve as a 3/4 access with a northbound left turn lane and a southbound right turn lane, and would only require an access permit. And although direct access onto 6 Mile would require bridging over the canal and then installing the southbound right turn lane. This would be a significant improvement for the project, in our opinion. It would help minimize the adverse impacts to area residents from moving trucks and delivery trucks, for example, that serve the proposed commercial uses that are, again, at more than double the original intensity. And could we also throw up the master concept plan, please? I noticed that the master concept plan for consideration today shows the right-of-way improvements within Penzance to accommodate the proposed westbound left turn lane into the project as being on the north side.
There, it's just, the mouse is crazy, sorry. I can't get it to go. Want to go, Katie.
Oh, it won't let you.
It's like,
If you do the first one, will it let me advance it from here?
I can't even get the mouse to come up on the thing. Hang on. Oh. I can't get it.
Oh, it's okay. Well, and can you remind me what exhibit the master concept plan is to the staff report for everyone's reference? But
Attachment D.
Attachment D. And you can kind of tell from the thumbnail that grade portion along Penzance is the proposed widening of Penzance to accommodate the westbound left turn lane into the project, and then also the through lane that a previous speaker had mentioned was only planned to be 10 feet wide versus 11 or 12 feet wide. So the widening in the master concept plan shows it on the north side of the road, which is inconsistent with the recent resubmittal on the companion development order case that shows the widening only on the south side adjacent to this project. So as I understand, the master concept plan has to be revised anyway to reflect Carissa RPD as residential, not commercial. So I asked that it also comport with the concurrent revised plans that are under review for the development order to avoid confusion. With these considerations in mind, we respectfully request that you accept staff's recommendation. Again, the schedule of use is still keeping that exclusion for escort services, dating services, tattoo parlors, that list of things that was inadvertently omitted, carrying forward, but also including these additional protections that we suggested as part of our testimony as conditions of approval. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming this morning. I need to make one note. Okay. Were there any other members of the public that wish to speak today? Okay, I don't see anyone. Are you ready to begin immediately with rebuttal, or do you need a few moments to reconvene with your team?
I think we can go forward.
Okay.
Again, for the record, Jeff Wright, on behalf of the applicant. There are a number of issues raised, and ultimately, in the big picture for this proceeding, the standard is whether or not the applicant has shown by the greater weight of competent substantial evidence that they meet the requirements for approval. And I realize that there are a lot of very helpful speakers and informative information today. Ultimately, I don't think that that impacts the greater weight of competent substantial evidence, which we believe that we have on the record already, that we have met the standard for approval. Having said all that, there's a few things that we want to address that were raised by both the community and during the course of today's proceedings. The first thing is the conditions. Madam Hearing Examiner, you mentioned that there's a couple of conditions that weren't carried over, and we had a chance to look at those. And the first is the hours of operation, which currently today are limited to, as Ms. Berkey said, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And I think that is condition number 13 on the existing zoning resolution. We're okay keeping that. And we're hopeful that that addresses those concerns that were raised by both the hearing examiner, Ms. Berkey, and others today. The other condition that you asked about was the broadcasting. We're okay with prohibiting amplified broadcasting systems, and I believe that was condition number 11 in the existing zoning approval. We're okay with leaving that as a condition. Another condition that we're willing to offer, and I have not had a chance to discuss this with staff, but in light of the concerns that were raised by the residents, Mr. Struve in particular, I recall, and I believe the gentleman with the slough mentioned that doors facing 6 Mile Cypress could be problematic, and we're willing to adopt a condition or have a condition on this zoning approval that says there will be no doors facing 6 Mile Cypress. So hopefully that addresses some of those concerns that were raised between the hours, the no broadcasting, and the no doors facing 6 Mile Cypress. I wish we could give them their entire wish list, but we have done our best to address their concerns and try to make it as compatible as possible with their existence and their residential lifestyle. I'm going to go through a list and, if necessary, call up our experts. The first point is architecture and design. As you know, our proposal does not include any particular architecture or design, but we will assure you, and we're bound by the requirement to meet the design requirements, and we will do so upon construction of this facility. So right now it's hard to say that the architecture is good or bad because we haven't presented any architecture. And this is an example of we're trying to work with the HOA, and in doing so provided a rendering. And that's not something that we're committed to or locked in on, and we ultimately have to comply with the code as far as architecture and design, and we are committed to do that. So and to the extent that the rendering provided might have misled the community into thinking it was going to be a particular type of design. That wasn't what was intended. We will comply with the code on architectural and design requirements.
Does the DO that's pending right now, did that include any elevations or architectural renderings?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But that's not what was shown in the hearing today? Okay.
Correct. That it was not consistent with what was shown on that rendering today by one of the speakers. Okay. I'm getting some of my information from the back, excuse me. The other traffic concerns, obviously, at the beginning, during our presentation in chief, we had Mr. Banks come up and Ms. Workman also provided some testimony about the need for the access where it's at, and that had to do with traffic engineering and stacking of vehicles. But ultimately, this is the configuration that we're proposing today, and we believe that it's taken into account all of the necessary considerations for placement of that particular ingress and egress point. Mr. Banks has already put on the record why. We have him here if we need to elaborate further. There's also kind of a general community concern about quality of life, and it may have been Ms. Struve that said, how does it help the community? How does what you're doing help us? And obviously, when you're a private property owner, you're trying to develop your property in the way that you envision it. And but during the course of that, it has been iterative, and we've been interacting with the HOA and the community as much as we can. And some of the things that we have done that we would not have done without their input and cooperation. The buffers are bigger than they need to be. They're enhanced buffers. They're beyond what the code requires. And that's all intended to protect the compatibility of the project, including the residential area to the north and surrounding areas. The buffers are one thing that we are offering to help. Reduce traffic. There's been a lot of talk about, and Mr. Banks spoke about, the reduced traffic from our proposal. And then there's this countervailing position or concern that you're doubling the commercial square footage. Well, it is true when you look at just those raw numbers that there is an effective doubling of commercial use, but the types of uses that we are evolving into or modifying this PD to contain are going to reduce the traffic. So it's a little bit of a misnomer to say you're doubling the intensity of the commercial. In fact, that's false. We're not. We're increasing the square footage by doubling the square footage of a particular component of the commercial, but we're not making it more intense. And we have that on the record already, that the traffic will be reduced as a result of the change in uses of this property. The other thing is open space. Open space is beyond what's required. We're offering a bigger open space than the code is required us to do. And not to be redundant, but the removal of objectionable uses in order to ensure compatibility. And staff was, I think, put a lot of time and effort into what's going to work here, what's not, what's going to be too intense, what's not going to be too intense. And the result is our current schedule of uses, which is a less intense version of what's there today. So that's another thing we're doing. And as I started with, several conditions to ensure the compatibility. We're carrying forward certain conditions from the previous zoning to ensure compatibility. And we're hopeful that as conditioned, this will be compatible and better than what is approved today. And to the question of how does this help our neighborhood, that's the answer. We have a lot of different ways that we're making this better than it is today. So that's the quality of life. Now, there's a concern about property values. This is a concern that comes up a lot at these types of hearings. And it's speculative to say that the property values will go down. And that's just a fact. Now, if there were studies and some other evidence to suggest that, no, as it's a fact they will go down, that would be different. But based on today's record, I think there was a guarantee from a real estate professional that the property values will go down. There's no evidence on the record that that will take place. In fact, they could go up. We just don't know. It's speculative. So I wanted to address that question about property values being a certainty to go down in residential. Today, it's zoned for more intense activity and uses. And to suggest that by lowering the overall intensity of the project, you're going to lower residential housing prices, it's just there's not anything in the record to support that finding. And I already talked about this doubling of commercial square footage being a little bit of a misnomer, and we do have Jim Banks here to discuss that further, but I think he does have enough competent evidence in the record to explain why. Fire trucks, we have a letter in the record from the fire department saying that this configuration allows them the access that they need to do their job. So there was a concern. We did want to give the courtesy of addressing that. Landscaping and a berm on Penzance. That was a question that was raised, and spoke with Mr. Herrera during the break, and I hopefully I get this right. The overall site is going to be elevated, but currently as proposed, there's no separate berm on top of that elevation. And we're hopeful by elevating the overall site, it will achieve the objective that the residents were concerned about having appropriate height for the buffer. Again, if there's additional questions, Mr. Herrera can address the elevation.
Yeah, I think a little bit, because I think I heard twofold. One was a flooding concern. If the elevation was higher, then there's that issue that needs to be addressed if that's going to create any off-site flooding to the neighbors. And the second I understood was more of a aesthetic view corridor coming into Penzance, because they currently have that 3 to 4 foot berm was the testimony, and what it would look like. So if the entire site is elevated, I can't imagine to that degree. I think both of those things would need to be addressed if you could.
If I may call Mr. Herrera up to
Certainly.
clarify. Thank you.
Good morning again.
Good morning, Michael Herrera, civil engineer with Grady Minor for the record. So the way it's proposed right now, the approximate elevation of Penzance Boulevard is around elevation at the edge of travel lane around 15.5. And that's going to be sloping up to get to our 25-year perimeter berm elevation. It's going up about 2.5 to 3 feet. So it does go up. There's a slight downward slope as it gets to the parking lot. Very, very minor. It's almost flat, but there is a little bit of slope to capture that runoff.
Well, you mentioned a perimeter berm, so there is a perimeter berm?
It's what they classify as a perimeter berm for stormwater management, meaning the back of your curb can act as the perimeter berm for stormwater management. So it retains water on site, it can't go off site.
And with the elevation differences, then what you're saying is that there would not be any off-site flooding because of that elevation that would happen?
So currently, the site doesn't have any stormwater management, so when it rains, it flows off. There's no controlled discharge rates. So under the proposed, and this happens just about every project, on any development, and the proposed development is actually going to provide better stormwater management than an undeveloped piece of property. We have to retain the water on site. We're allowed at a specific discharge rate through Lee County and the South Florida Water Management District. So by creating that berm, we're creating a basin to store the water on site and restricting our discharge rate, which is much less than the existing condition of an undeveloped piece of property.
And do you know on the northern piece on the Cypress Walk, I don't know if you've reviewed that ERP to know, is the site design of the berm, is theirs intended to be capturing stormwater management? Is that for a stormwater management purpose, or is it more of a aesthetic?
The northern property berm?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So they have their extreme slope, that it's going up because you have residents there, so it needs to be higher on the back of the home so they can direct flow towards their on-site stormwater management lakes. So yes, their property too, just like any development, has a perimeter berm.
Thank you.
Okay, again, Jeff Wright for the record. One other thing, this is under the category of conditions. I think Ms. Berkey, and I'm sorry if I got the source of this wrong, it might have been the gentleman from the SLU, but the backlighting of signs, it's currently a condition in the existing zoning. I don't think it got carried forward. We have conditions in there to direct our lights a certain way, but we also wanted to make sure, and I apologize, I don't have the number of that condition in the existing, it's on my computer, but we're willing to put that back in there. No backlighting, no backlit signs. And if it would be helpful, I can just take a peek at my computer and tell you what the existing.
I think it would be helpful. We're going to need to leave the record open because we've got so many revisions to the conditions. So I don't need it right into the record right now. I think because there seems to be some interplay, we'll just leave the record open for an appropriate period of time so that that can be addressed.
Okay, and just to finish the thought, it is condition 12D, like David, in the existing zoning approval.
Okay.
So we're willing to put that back in. I think we've addressed pretty much everything. There was a comment from Ms. Berkey about dumpster space. And the current DO, they are requesting a deviation from that requirement. And given the uses on the property, it's not a high garbage generator. During the course of the DO, they're seeking a deviation from that capacity requirement. And in the course of that process of seeking the deviation, they have to provide appropriate justification for doing so. It's a separate process where staff reviews that. So right now, we're not comfortable addressing dumpster capacity at this zoning level, but it is being addressed at the DO level, and we are bound by the code requirement if we are seeking a deviation from that, and we're in the middle of that process right now. So I didn't want to leave that hanging. I know it was a concern that was raised, and that's how we're addressing it for the time being. And with that, that pretty much concludes our rebuttal comments, unless there's some questions.
Do you have the exact acreage of the site? The staff report referenced 10 acres, but I think this morning someone said 9.7 something. And the reason I'm asking the question is, as you know, the code requires a second access if it's 10 acres or more. So I don't know if we're right at that threshold or if we're just below it. The legal description that I find doesn't give me an actual acreage.
9.79 acres is what we've been going on all along. We're looking through the legal description here to see.
So you are just below what the code would require to trigger the second access. I'm curious, based on what Ms. Berkey said,
and I'll ask staff this whenever we get up, if staff is still in support of an access off of 6 Mile, I'm just again curious as to why it's not being provided as a safety concern for circulation and those kind of things.
I'm going to call Mr. Banks up there.
Thank you.
Better able to answer that.
Yeah. Again, for the record, Jim Banks. Want to reiterate what I said earlier, that we prepared the traffic study based upon the design of having the single point of access on the Penzance Boulevard. Your staff reviewed that report, and based on its conclusions that Penzance Boulevard, with the completion of the development, only 50% of the road's capacity will be utilized. So staff reviewed that in their consideration of our proposed access plan, which forgoes the allowance to have access onto 6 Mile Cypress. And I would like to also point out that the land use attorney representing the neighbors, she said that she spoke to Marcus Evans, who's here, I saw him walk in, and that they spoke to Lee County DOT, and they said they had no objection to us having access on 6 Mile. So again, it's an entitlement, it's an option that the property owner can exercise or forego. And in this case, based upon the fact that there's a substantial reduction in the volume of traffic, and that staff did agree with our findings and conclusion that the single point of access onto Penzance Boulevard was adequate, they did recommend approval based upon the reduction in traffic and the proposed single point of access. I would also like to point out to the hearing examiner that the proposed left turn lane that will be constructed on Penzance Boulevard is required to meet county standards. So the suggestion that it won't be of adequate width or something to accommodate fire trucks is not going to be something that's going to be an issue, again, because there are certain standards in place that we have to adhere to during the development stage. And we also have to submit a final plan to the fire department to get their final approval before anything is built. So we will be in compliance with the fire department.
And there was a concern that was raised about the accuracy of the master concept plan showing that turn lane. Did you have any concerns about that, or is this reflect?
Well, Michael's been working on the final. Michael, you want to come up and just confirm the where you are on the design of the turn lane going into the subject site?
Michael Herrera, Grady Minor, Civil Engineer for Project. So, yeah, we have made an initial submittal to Lee County. DOT reviewed it. They had some comments. We addressed those comments, and we're back in currently for our second review. We feel that we will be found sufficient in terms of all the criteria required for those turn lanes.
And are there any amendments that need to be made to the master concept plan is the question in terms of what we're here doing today? Because the scope of the DO is outside of the scope of
The location of ingress egress is still the same.
Okay, thank you.
And I did get a copy of the, again, Jeff Wright for the record, got a copy of the legal description just to confirm it is 9.79 acres.
Thank you.
And that concludes our points of rebuttal. I just want to reiterate the standard of review and respectfully request that you recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff ready for your rebuttal?
So before I start, I have copies of the letters that came in from the residents, and I have a copy.
Thank you.
So what I want to speak to is the architectural standards and the question about improvements to Penzance, I believe it was, or 6 Mile, and then the CS2 zoned property located to the east and the development of that site. And then I have Marcus Evans here, who can come up and speak to the review of the access and the traffic impact statement. So first off, I want to talk about the architectural standards. So in the Land Development Code, we've heard a lot about the Land Development Code. At time of zoning, we do not reiterate code. And what code says is in 10-600 It goes into the architectural standards that you pick from. It gives you a choice. It's multiple choice, and you pick 3 of them. The choices that the applicant has before them are awnings or attached canopies, overhangs, porticos, arcades, minimum of 8 feet clear in width, peaked roof forms, display windows along a minimum of 50% of the front walls and other wall alongside a pedestrian walkway, clock or bell towers, or any other treatment which the Development Services Director finds meets the intent of this section. So when a Development Services Reviewer gets a hold of this and reviews the development order drawings, they're looking for 3 things that they're choosing to do. In addition to, on large projects, one of the following site design elements must be incorporated in that development order. Integration of specialty pavers, stamped concrete along the building's walkway, fountains, reflection ponds, or other water elements, surface water management facilities designed as physical or visual amenities, and then any other alternative treatment or combination the Development Services Director deems sufficient. So that's how it's reviewed. Currently, what's in-house right now is not approved because it can't be approved because this hasn't gone to the board yet and we don't have a final decision. So what is in the system right now is a mixed bag of elevation changes on top of that roof. The document that was brought before this hearing, staff did not see. We were not at that meeting. We didn't see what was being proposed. We have a development order which staff will look at during zoning and see what's going on with a site development, making sure like the square feet is matching or what have you. But we don't look at, because all of that can change through insufficiency review and conditions of zoning, of course. So that's speaking to the architectural standards that are required. And that's a development order function. We can reiterate that maybe 4 or 5 of the things instead of the 3 things, but we don't reiterate code and zoning. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, I believe it was somebody asked about the 6 Mile Cypress in Penzance having improvements or some sort of, or no, it was Penzance. It was plans for Penzance improvements. So that would be a capital improvement project because the county owns that. There are no improvements in the capital improvement project plans, as well as the Metropolitan Planning Organization that looks at the county and the surrounding counties globally at our traffic. In the 2045 plans, there are no improvements for Penzance. So the only improvements that are going to happen are associated at time of development order for off-site improvements to Penzance to support this project. So that's where we're at, and that's what Mr. Herrera was just talking about the turn lanes and what's being reviewed for off-site improvements. The other thing I wanted to touch on was there was a lot of time spent on the CS2 piece. The applicant stated that they approached that owner to purchase, to incorporate it in onto this property. They could not purchase it. So what does that mean? If the owner comes in to develop the site, they will be held under the same land development code and LEED plan that this project is. So they will have to provide the buffering. They'll have to provide the open space. They'll have, in this case, with a small project like that, it would be 20% open space. The access would be an issue. So there's a cross-access easement, the ingress-egress access easement in the condition in the zoning that allows that to happen. And if difference between this project and the CS2 is, if the CS2 property decides that they can't meet land development code, they have to go through a variance process. And the variance process has stringent criteria that the applicant will have to demonstrate hardship. Hardship isn't the design of the property, I can't meet the buffer. You can't have, the hardship is not something you're bringing about themselves. So they'll have to go through a hearing to show meeting requirements of that. So it's not as easy as, well, they're gonna put this intense office on there and then they're gonna be, ripping through this project. And it's not as easy as that. They're going to have to meet, and with the triangular shaped piece, with a square box on that, they probably are not going to be able to meet the land development code holistically. So a variance would be needed because that is conventionally zoned. So if they choose to go into a planned development, they'll go through the same process that we're here in today. With that, I want to turn it over to Marcus unless you have additional questions for me. I'm not going to touch on the buffering. I just want to say that we have a berm increase in our code. And if we go on the 3 to 4 foot berm with a 16-foot tree height, we're at a 20-foot visual on that. So a 20-foot visual, you're going to see trunks. You won't see canopy. So I just want to, and my background is botany, so I'm very familiar with that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marcus.
Good morning.
Good morning or afternoon.
Good afternoon, you're right. Were you in the room when I administered the oath?
Yes, I was sworn in.
Okay,
so.
thank you.
Marcus Evans, I'm an engineer with the Lee County Department of Community Development, and in the past I've been accepted as a witness in transportation planning and traffic engineering, and I was sworn in. Just wanted to briefly clarify the comment that I made to Ms. Berkey, just to make sure that it's clear that yes, I did indeed speak with Lee County Department of Transportation staff regarding the access, potential for an access on 6 Mile Cypress Parkway. Indeed, it has been approved through a controlled access resolution that I believe Ms. Berkey put on the record. And so Lee County Department of Transportation staff had no objection if indeed the applicant would choose to put an access there. And I say choose to put an access. I think it was mentioned that there's an entitlement, and it's been approved. The board has considered that, and they've agreed that that would be an acceptable place for an access. 3/4 access, so right in, right out, and then a northbound left would be permissible. Does that mean that they would have to put the northbound left in, just be satisfied with the right in, right out? I see no reason why that wouldn't be accepted, but again, we would have to review it, and Lee County Department of Transportation staff would review that as well. So there was some discussion about the acreage. This is under the threshold of 10 acres, slightly, not by much. But the way that the code reads, and it's very specific, it says more than 10 acres, not 10 or more. So if you rounded up the 9.79 to 10, you could maybe argue that, but the way it's worded, it says more than 10. So I think that they do indeed meet the requirement of the code by having the single access. They could, again, have that additional access if they chose. If the CS2 parcel were at some point combined with this parcel, then that would have to go through the zoning process, and then it would exceed that 10 acres. So then they would need an additional access. That additional access, in speaking again with Lee County Department of Transportation staff, they're not comfortable with another access on Penzance. So the other access would have to be off of 6 Mile Cypress Parkway. So the location of the one, and Mr. Banks had explained it as well, it's as far as we can get away from that signalized intersection at the intersection of 6 Mile Cypress and Penzance. And there's an area that's would be close to any intersection described as the area of influence or a functional area of an intersection. And that's an area where you try to avoid having any unnecessary accesses, because there's a lot of decision making that goes on in that area. And so the closer you get to that intersection, the more decisions that people are making. They're slowing down. As they're leaving the intersection, they're speeding up, and you don't want any more visual clutter or any more areas that might distract the mind, you might say, from doing the job of driving. So having that access far away as we can from that intersection is probably prudent.
Does that same logic extend to the 6 Mile Cypress approved access that they're getting rid of? Because my understanding is a controlled access facility, those are identified because you're trying to limit the access points because of the nature of the roadway, the speed that they're traveling, those kinds of things. So I'm just curious if DOT or your staff have a preference to not have that access even though it's been approved. Is the single access on Penzance the safest from a public safety perspective?
The Land Development Code Section 10-285 would require that access, sites that have access opportunities that are not on an arterial or collector, that be the location where we would have an access. Generally speaking, and I say generally because there are obviously cases that we might have to use some discretion, but generally speaking, you try to have accesses on the lower volume roads, the lower functional classification roads. In this case, we have an arterial 6 Mile Cypress Parkway, and then we have a Penzance Boulevard, which is a collector, so it's a lower functional classification road. So our code would seem to support, again, having that access on a lower functional classification road and a lower volume road in this case, obviously, as well. When it comes to limited access facilities, every access on a main arterial road is going to potentially negatively affect safety and operations. And this is a kind of a freeway type, and it's not a freeway, but it's limited access. So the idea is get from point A to point B fairly quickly. And so the additional accesses will tend to slow down traffic and also can pose safety issues as well. You got a higher speed road as well, 6 Mile Cypress Parkway. Again, being limited access, that gives there's some pros to that as well. And on Penzance, it's a lower speed roadway as well. So I could see benefits, and in speaking with Lee County Department of Transportation staff, they could see some benefits of having the access on 6 Mile Cypress Parkway, but they again indicated no objection to that. But there's a generally speaking, the more accesses that you have to a site, the more conflict points you create, and so there's more potential for safety issues. And so not having an overabundance of accesses would be prudent in that regard.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Did staff have any further rebuttal?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Did applicants have anything final for your rebuttal?
Nothing left.
Thank you. So with that, I'm sorry, we closed public comment.
There's just a point of clarification on the master concept plan as compared to the DO plan.
I asked that question of Mr. Herrera, I think, and his testimony was that this didn't require revision with what the most recent DO was.
It shows the road widening on the north, whereas the development order concept plan, or the site plan that was just resubmitted this week, shows it on the south. So
is there any final comment that needs to be made or addressed to that? I'm going to leave the record open, as I said, for some for revised conditions. So if we need to make a revision to the master concept plan, that's a fairly easy fix. I just want to be sure that that's required. Good morning.
Yeah,
or afternoon.
my apologies earlier. I thought we were talking specifically of the point of ingress-egress along Penzance. So yes, this concept plan was the initial submittal that we did to DOT, and as a result of their comments, it has now been shifted to the south. So the north side of the edge of pavement on Penzance will remain as is.
Okay. So this is not consistent with the current DO that's been submitted?
Correct. This was we just submitted the second DO.
Okay. Did you want to?
And we appreciate Ms. Berkey pointing that out. One solution would be to take the off-site information and features off of our master concept.
I would prefer that because it sounds like you're still fairly early in the DO phase, and it sounds like there's been several iterations. So what I don't want to do is have you come in and amend the master concept plan every time it's inconsistent with that level of detail in a DO, because as we all know, those things change.
Okay, so I believe we would have the exact same thing here, but remove the off-site stuff.
Yes, and if there was a correction, I think she also said to the Carissa it needed to be an RPD now.
Yes, that's an RPD. That would
Very
be the
minor.
two.
Okay.
We'll make those two changes.
Yes, and then just revised conditions, if applicant and staff could get together and give me a holistic now, because there were several additions and changes to things. I just want to have a clean version of that. How much time do we need to do that?
A week?
End of next week. Does that work? Okay, so we'll leave the record open solely for those two items, revised conditions and the minor amendments to the master concept plan, until end of business on July 7th. My calendar is correct here. Hold on one second. Yes, end of business on July 7th.
So for everyone else, again, you will receive, if you filled out a form today, you will receive a copy by email of the recommendation that's issued, as well as the date that the item will be heard before the Board of County Commissioners. I thank everybody for coming today, and thank you for your time. Please stay safe and stay well with everything going on. Thank you. Did you need anything?